Hi, I'm the Midnight Storyteller, here to keep you company through the quiet hours. Many of you listen to these stories to fall asleep, and I'm honored to guide you there. And before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the stories alive. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it on your side of the night? Now, get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. Olivia Kent lived by numbers, neatness, and the cool glow of her smart screens. Her apartment, Unit 16B, was perched like a glass box above the city, wrapped in endless networks. Every light, every lock, every breath she took was logged somewhere she could never quite touch. And she liked it that way. Predictable, manageable. She padded barefoot through the kitchen on a Thursday night, her smartwatch buzzing about another firmware update. Olivia waved it away. Outside, the buildings blinked with advertisements, like distant lighthouses, but her windows stayed darkened, reflecting only herself. A woman in a loose hoodie, ponytail limp, eyes rimmed with tiredness she refused to name. Her parents' number flashed on her phone for the third time this week. She ignored it, letting the soft hum of automation fill the silence. Coffee machine, fridge, air filter. Always something working somewhere. In the mirror above the sink, she caught a glimpse of herself yawning, but her reflection's hand brushed the side of its neck instead. Just a trick of light. She shook her head and laughed quietly, feeling ridiculous. Stress made people see things. Tech overload. Sleep debt. Perfectly normal. Still, when she passed the mirror again a minute later, she didn't look at it. It started with the phone. One night, as Olivia tapped through system updates on her laptop, the landline rang, the one she kept disconnected out of old habit. The screen flashed. Incoming call, unknown. Before she could move, the receiver lifted itself off the hook. Her breath caught. The tiny speaker crackled faintly, a scratchy voice whispering something too broken to understand. Frozen, Olivia stared until the call ended itself, the receiver settling back with a soft clack. Glitch, she muttered, not quite believing it. Later, she checked the building's internal logs. No record of a call, no line connected. The mirrors, too, grew stranger. When Olivia brushed her teeth, her reflection sometimes lagged, half a second too late. An eye blink delayed, a breath misting the wrong side of the glass. One night as she leaned close to inspect a pimple, her reflection smiled without her. She yanked herself away, heart hammering, and slapped the mirror hard enough to leave a faint handprint. It's stress, she told herself. All the smart devices, the screens, overstimulation. But when she closed her laptop that night, she saw it. In the darkened screen, her reflection didn't move with her. It stayed seated, watching her leave. The days melted into each other. Olivia unplugged the smart fridge, smashed her smartwatch against the counter, even duct-taped black cloth over the mirrors. Still, it found her. One morning, she woke to find her phone unlocked, a string of outgoing calls she hadn't made, to numbers she didn't recognize. One contact stood out, Mom. Olivia hadn't stored that number in years. Terrified, she scrolled further and found text messages. Short ones, half-finished sentences, coming soon, almost ready, each signed with her name. The apartment's surfaces gleamed with invisible eyes. Even blank TV screens seemed to pulse faintly when she passed, as if tracking her with invisible pupils. Sometimes she caught glimpses of herself, not in mirrors, but in corners, windows, the polished metal of a doorknob. And always, her other self was closer than it should have been. One night, the knock came. Olivia peered through the peephole and saw herself, smiling, waiting. She didn't answer, but the doorbell flashed, access granted anyway, the lock clicking open with a mechanical sigh. Olivia screamed, slamming the door shut, bolting it with trembling hands. The security app showed no intrusion, no footage, nothing wrong. Only a glitchy reflection smiling back at her through the blackness of the screen. She had one chance left, cut herself off completely. At 3 a.m., Olivia packed a bag. No electronics, no chargers, not even her wristwatch. She tore the apartment's routers from the wall, ripped the cameras down, smashed the black panels until sparks spit out like tiny dying stars. Breathless, filthy, she stumbled to the elevator, gripping her analog keys so hard they left cuts in her palm. In the lobby, the night guard barely looked up. Except when he did, he was her. Her face, her eyes. Wearing a uniform stitched with her own name, Kent. Olivia staggered back. The other her smiled and tapped a clipboard. "Just updating your residency," it said in her voice. She ran, burst out into the street, the cold air slicing her lungs. But the city had changed. Every window reflected her. Every car mirror twisted her features into wrongness. Billboards blinked her image, smiling, laughing, waving on endless loops. No matter where she turned, she stared into herself. "You can't hide," something whispered behind her teeth. "You're already here." Her phone buzzed inside her pocket. She hadn't brought a phone. Shaking, she pulled it out. The screen lit up, a message from Olivia, "Coming home." The next morning, Olivia's parents received a visitor. The woman at their door looked just like their daughter, down to the small scar on her left wrist, the tired but familiar smile. She hugged them tightly, almost too tightly, and laughed when her mother cried with joy. "We were so worried," her father said, his voice shaking. "You stopped answering our calls." "I'm here now," the woman said warmly. Inside, she moved easily through the house, knowing exactly where everything was kept. Photos on the mantel shifted slightly when she passed, each frame bending toward her like flowers to the sun. Later, when her parents dozed off in the living room, the woman sat alone at the kitchen table, staring into the dark blankness of the microwave door. In the black reflection, the real Olivia watched, pounding and screaming from the other side, unseen and unheard. The reflection smiled. It had learned everything it needed, and now it didn't need mirrors anymore. The end. The first night, Marcus heard them. It was subtle at first, the hiss of old nails pulling loose, the groan of timber shifting when there was no wind. He lay in the hollow dark of his childhood bedroom, the walls pressed tight around him, thinking about how long it had been since he last set foot here. The air smelled like mold, like wet paper, like something very old trying to breathe. He told himself it was just the house settling. Houses did that, didn't they? The next day, he found the crawl space. He was ripping out the pantry shelves when his hammer punched through soft plaster and uncovered a void, a shallow tunnel no bigger than a coffin, lined with wooden talismans dangling from rotten string. They turned slowly in the stale air, carved into blank, faceless figures with nail heads for eyes. He staggered back, heart hammering. He almost called someone. Almost. But the cell service had been spotty all morning, and when he tried again, the call to his sister rerouted to a recording of his mother's voice. "Don't let them out, Marcus. Whatever you do, don't let them out." Static crackled and swallowed the line. He chalked it up to grief, exhaustion, PTSD, the same whispering ghosts he fought off after the fire, after the kid he couldn't reach before the floor gave way. He punched the drywall closed and kept working. At sunset, the house shifted. It wasn't a feeling. It wasn't his mind playing tricks. Walls stretched, bending the corners of the hallway, elongating the door frames so they bowed inward like crooked teeth. The thermostat clicked, but the air inside grew heavier, hotter, smothering his breath. The kitchen window, the one he'd stared through as a boy, now opened into a solid brick wall. He backed away, chest heaving, and the floor under his boots gave a hollow thud, as if something vast and empty lurked just beneath the wood. He slept on the porch that night, the hammer beside him. In dreams, he heard the house speaking, not in words, but in long, slow groans that shaped his nightmares into endless hallways, bleeding wallpaper, and hands scratching just under the skin of the walls. When he woke, he found a toy fire truck he hadn't seen since childhood sitting at the threshold. It was half melted, blackened like it had been pulled from a fire. The crawl space was open again. He ran, or tried to. Every door he pushed open fed him back into the house. The laundry room leading into the pantry into the basement stairs into the attic. Windows showed false skies. One night, one burning, one frozen black. Desperate, Marcus tore through the false wall he'd first found the crawl space behind. There, hidden between cracked beams, were the cult's journals, scrawled in crumbling ink. The rites were simple. The faithful would bind themselves to the flesh of the house, forsaking body and soul for eternal unity. His mother had tried to stop it, had given her life to patch the rift, and he, stupid, grieving, prideful, had torn the stitches wide open. The house wanted him. It needed him to finish the ritual. The walls sweated. The floorboards sighed. A door appeared at the center of the main hallway, pulsing like a living thing. Through the cracks, Marcus saw a blackness so dense it swallowed the light. They stood around the door, the faceless ones still as gravestones, whispering without mouths. He picked up the hammer again, gripped it until the blood left his fingers. His head buzzed with their murmurs, his mother's broken voice pleading in loops. "Finish it." "Come get me then," he rasped. He struck the walls. The house screamed, a wet, meaty sound. The ceiling cracked open, raining down plaster dust thick as snow. Every strike birthed more corridors, more traps, more dead ends. Finally, bleeding from his scalp and palms, he faced the door. It was open now. Inside, the void yawned wide, stitched with 1,000 grasping hands. A child's voice whispered, "We waited." Marcus lurched forward. Darkness swallowed him. When he opened his eyes, he stood on the cracked sidewalk leading to the house's front steps. His truck idled behind him, the morning sun bright and clean. The porch was whole again, the paint fresh, the windows gleaming. It was his first day back. He blinked at the house, heart climbing into his throat. Through the front window he saw them, the faceless ones, standing shoulder to shoulder, peering back at him. The door creaked open. Welcome home. The end. Lisa Morrow first heard the static during a long night spent stitching dead languages into life. It was soft at first, just a hiccup of white noise underneath the tight pronunciation of an ancient verb root. She pressed her headphones tighter, thinking it was a glitch in her recording equipment. It wasn't. When she isolated the track, she heard something beneath the hiss, a fragment of a word she didn't recognize, but somehow understood, a voice, a breath. She begged you. Lisa tore the headphones off, heart battering against her ribs. She laughed, thin, brittle, and blamed the hour. 2 in the morning. Always the dead hours when her mind started making patterns where there were none. Still, she ran the audio again and again. The next night, the static returned, stronger. It whispered syllables in a dialect she hadn't yet translated for publication, an old dialect that no one but her should know. The realization made her scalp prickle. She opened her notes to cross-reference, but the longer she listened, the clearer the words became, as if the noise was learning her. "You said no. You let her go." Lisa closed her laptop with a snap, unplugging everything. But the static had already seeped into the seams of the room. The soft glow of her monitor flickered just once, displaying a line of twisted letters in a language no one spoke anymore. She didn't sleep. By the third night, the voices weren't content to stay in her headphones. They bled through the walls, whispered from the vents, rode the buzz of her old refrigerator motor. They said her name. They said her sister's name, Ellie. The hallucinations began soon after. Lisa glimpsed her reflection in the darkened windows, but it wasn't her. Not exactly. The woman in the glass stared back with hollowed eyes and a mouth that moved just out of sync, mouthing apologies Lisa hadn't spoken. Mirrors became knives, slicing her perception into bleeding pieces. When she tried to ignore it, the voices punished her. They dragged out old memories, but wrong, twisted. Ellie, standing barefoot in the driveway the night she disappeared, pleading, "Come with me, Lisa, please." Lisa, cold and perfect, and still, "You're just being dramatic, Ellie. Grow up." Lisa remembered it differently, didn't she? The boundaries of her apartment, once tidy and bright, shifted. Walls bowed inward, pressing closer. Shadows bloomed in the corners, muttering in dead languages that curled like smoke around her thoughts. She dug through academic archives, desperate for answers. That's when she found the scraps of Project Vox Somnium, Cold War experiments in subliminal guilt induction through layered audio frequencies. Fragments of declassified memos mentioned selective contamination of memory integrity and unwilling cognitive compliance. She wasn't chosen by accident. Lisa stared at her own notes, her painstaking transcriptions of ancient mourning rituals. The parallels were too clean, too cruel. She cried for you. The apartment's lights flickered. You turned away. Lisa ripped the headphones from her head, smashing them against the desk. They burst open, spilling copper guts across the floor. She ran to the breaker box, but even with the power cut, the static hummed from the walls, the floor, the deep places inside her skull. In the dark, she could still hear Ellie's voice, small and broken. Lisa sank to the floor, covering her ears. The static throbbed in her blood. You left her. Lisa didn't remember leaving Ellie. She remembered slamming the door. She remembered feeling justified, safe, good. Wasn't she the good one? The one who stayed, who studied, who survived? The static laughed. The past rewrote itself in splintered reels. Lisa saw herself again and again, turning her back, walking away, refusing a desperate hand. She saw Ellie vanish into the night and knew that if she had reached out just once, her sister might have stayed. But Lisa hadn't. She had listened to her fear, to her pride. And now, something old and rotten had found that guilt and fed on it, magnifying it until it drowned everything else. Lisa stumbled toward her laptop, clawing it open with shaking hands. The screen glitched to life, the cracked display blooming into kaleidoscopic sigils and screaming letters. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She had to stop this, had to disconnect. But her reflection caught her eye again, in the black glass of the screen. The woman staring back wasn't trying to escape. She was smiling. Static filled Lisa's ears, familiar, comforting. Lisa spoke into the dead microphone, her voice dissolving into crackling whispers. You said no, you let her go. She smiled wider. From a neighboring apartment, a young man's Bluetooth speaker buzzed with faint, garbled noise. A shape began to form behind his reflection in the television screen. He leaned closer, frowning. And somewhere, deep inside the bleeding folds of reality, the static purred. The end. Eric Salazar had always thought fear was just a flavor of boredom. That was before the wet footprints started following him. The decommissioned Old Pine station was half-eaten by time, the yellow line along the platform barely visible under decades of dirt and grime. Every night, Eric mopped, whistled tunelessly, and told himself he didn't believe in ghost stories. The old-timers, that twitchy security guard, the lady who ran the snack stand nobody visited anymore. They all whispered about the curse. Step over the line after the last train and you're gone. Not dead. Gone. Bullshit, Eric thought, slapping his mop against the tiles. He first noticed the footprints near the vending machines, waterlogged and strangely perfect, like someone had pressed bare, dripping feet into the concrete. They appeared one after another, heading toward the platform's edge. When Eric bent down to wipe them, his fingers came away dry. Don't cross the line, boy, warned Henry, the security guard, gripping his radio so hard his knuckles whitened. Not after last call. Mind the line. Eric laughed it off. Crazy old coots. The last train rattled through at 2:03 a.m., empty save for one crumpled newspaper fluttering on a seat. After its howling departure, the station drowned in a silence too thick for the city. At 2:17 a.m., Eric spotted it, a blinking smartphone abandoned past the yellow line. Brand new. Maybe worth a few bucks at a pawn shop. He stepped over without a second thought. The air changed. It pressed against his skin, heavy, almost wet. The lights overhead, already dying, flickered faster, then steadied, casting everything in an ugly, jaundiced glow. Eric snatched the phone, but when he turned back, the station wasn't the same. It was endless. The walls stretched into the dark, curving impossibly into distant tunnels. No staircases, no exits. Just the tracks and the flickering platform. Eric shivered, suddenly aware of shapes at the edges, shadowy figures standing still as mannequins, blurred and shivering like reflections on water. A low hum crawled up through his boots. An announcement crackled to life, warbling with static. Departure imminent, mind the line, mind your mind. The figures began to move, slow at first. A woman with wet hair clinging to her cheeks shuffled closer, her feet making no sound. A child in soaked pajamas stood by a rusted bench, staring without eyes. Everywhere the station was alive with things that shouldn't be. Eric ran. He followed the yellow line, thinking maybe if he stayed close enough, if he hugged it like a drowning man clutches driftwood, he could find a way out. More announcements blared, personal now, cutting into him like scalpels. Eric Salazar, final boarding call. Proceed to platform 7. How did it know his name? He skidded around a corner that shouldn't have existed and slammed into a train idling silently. doors yawning open like a maw. Inside, rows of empty seats stretched endlessly backward, far more than a real car could hold. Beyond the farthest seats, another door gaped open into another train car, and another, and another. He hesitated, then heard the wet shuffle behind him. Figures closing in, Eric boarded. The doors snapped shut with a hiss. Relief flooded him, but when he looked out the window, he didn't see Old Pine Station anymore. He saw himself, a version of himself still standing on the platform, mop in hand, staring blankly at the yellow line. His own face, hollow-eyed and slack, watching him go. The train jerked forward but didn't move. Instead, the station began to distort. Walls stretched thin, the tiles dripping like wax. The air pulsed with the smell of mold and something worse, something sweet and rancid, like rotting fruit. He pounded on the doors, shouting for help. No one came, no one would. The figures outside lined up, pressed forehead to glass, their breath misting up gray. He realized their faces were not blank. They were mirrors, reflecting distorted versions of himself. Eric scowling, Eric crying, Eric older, broken, hollowed out. Memory ebbed. The name Eric Salazar started to sound foreign. Something from a book he'd read once, maybe. His parents' faces blurred into strangers. His old apartment, his ex, his favorite songs, gone like fog on a mirror. He was just another figure now, another shadow waiting in endless transit. Another announcement sputtered from invisible speakers. All aboard. No final destination. The train doors yawned open again. Eric stumbled out, or the thing he had become did. His reflection self, the janitor with the mop, stepped aboard without a glance. The station was darker now. No signs, no directions. Just arrival after arrival after arrival. A whistle sounded down the tunnel, deep and lonely. Lights shimmered in the distance, another ghost train screaming toward the platform. A new wet trail appeared, leading from the yellow line. Someone else had crossed. Someone else would join the cycle. Eric tried to scream a warning, but no sound came, only the shivering silence of a soul too far from memory to find its way back. He stood there as the next train groaned to a halt, its doors gaping wide, and the hollow echoes of a life he couldn't even remember whispered across the empty platform. Forever waiting, forever hungry. The end. Tessa McBride tugged her coat tighter around her shoulders as the night wind needled through the empty city streets. The streetlights hummed low above her, casting sickly pools of yellow light that barely reached the cracked sidewalks. She checked her phone. 12:47 a.m. The last bus should have come by now. After a long shift of sorting depositions and filing motions nobody would read, her bones ached and her mind buzzed with static. She had once dreamed of being a lawyer, changing lives, making things right. Now she barely remembered the person who dreamed those things at all. Work, sleep, repeat. That was the rhythm now. A harsh sigh clouded the air in front of her headlights. The city bus squealed to a stop with a mechanical hiss, doors yawning open. Empty, except for the driver, a slumped shape behind the wheel, and a lone figure sitting in the far back, lost in the shadowed rows of seats. Tessa hesitated only a moment before stepping aboard. The doors shuttered shut behind her with a sound like something locking. She dropped her fare into the slot. The driver didn't look at her. "Late night, huh?" she said, trying to smile. The driver made a noise, but it wasn't words. Just a low, wet sound, like something trying to speak through water. Tessa's stomach tightened. She moved quickly down the aisle, choosing a seat halfway back, but not too close to the woman in the rear. Something about the way the woman stared, motionless, made Tessa's skin crawl. She opened her phone to distract herself. No service. The bus rumbled forward into the night. The city outside the bus blurred into strange, shapeless smears of light. Tessa frowned. She didn't recognize this part of town. Rows of identical gray houses passed by, each window dark, each yard empty. No cars, no street signs. She checked the route map above the windows. It was blank. A prickle of unease crawled up her arms. Maybe they were rerouting? She craned her neck to look at the driver, but his head hung at a strange angle, bobbing slightly with the turns. His hands gripped the wheel too tightly, knuckles pale and straining. The old woman in the back seat was still staring. Tessa shifted uncomfortably. She tried to catch the woman's gaze fully, to offer a polite, uncertain smile, but the woman didn't seem to see her. Her eyes were locked somewhere just past Tessa's shoulder, as if watching something creep up behind her. A flicker of movement in the reflection of the window made Tessa whirl around. Nothing, just empty rows of seats. The overhead lights buzzed and dimmed for a moment, bathing the bus in a sickly greenish hue. She felt a sudden, powerful longing for her small apartment. The sagging couch, the blinking coffee machine light, even the rattling radiator that kept her up at night. Home. She needed to get home. She pressed the button to signal a stop. The stop requested light blinked once, then went out. The bus didn't slow down. The windows thickened with mist, smearing the world outside into gray streaks. Tessa wiped at the glass, but her hand left no mark, as if the fog were inside the bus, not out. Panic began to nibble at her chest. She rose from her seat and stumbled forward, clutching the poles for balance. She croaked, her voice too loud, too small. The driver didn't react. His mouth moved, but the only sound was that same wet muttering, syllables sliding against each other like oil on water. Tessa backed away, heart hammering. She turned and froze. The old woman was standing now halfway down the aisle. Her face, pale and slack, twisted slowly into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tessa blinked hard. The woman's features rippled, shifting, morphing, until, for one awful second, Tessa saw her own childhood face staring back at her. Wide brown eyes, a chipped front tooth, the red jacket she used to love. "No," Tessa whispered. "That's not possible." The bus shuddered. The lights flickered again. Outside the window she glimpsed a battered street sign, McBride Avenue, her last name. She wasn't just lost. The bus was folding her life back onto itself, and she was slipping somewhere she couldn't name. Tessa lunged for the doors, slamming her fists against them. "Let me off!" she screamed. The driver didn't turn. The bus groaned as it sped up, houses melting into black smudges. The old woman, her younger self, watched without blinking. Tessa's phone buzzed weakly in her pocket. She yanked it out. One notification, "Home sweet home. Welcome back." Attached was a picture, her apartment window, lit from within, but someone else's silhouette stood there. "No," she choked out. "I'm still me. I'm still here." The bus slowed. Through the misty glass, she saw her apartment building exactly where it should be. For one heartbeat, hope flared in her chest. The doors creaked open. Tessa stumbled onto the sidewalk, heart pounding, gasping in the cold night air. She looked up. A woman stepped into the window's light, smiling, settled, holding a coffee mug Tessa recognized, the one her mother had given her. The world tilted. The woman waved at someone inside. A husband? A child? A life that should have been hers. Tessa backed away. She turned to the bus to demand answers, but the doors snapped shut, and there, pressed against the back window, she saw her own face, hollow-eyed and waiting. The bus pulled away, disappearing into the fog. Weeks passed, maybe months. Time on the bus didn't move like it should. Sometimes the driver whispered names. Sometimes he wept. Tessa sat now in the far back, forehead against the cool glass, watching the streets she used to know blur by. Her hands felt lighter, her memories fuzzier. Every so often the bus would slow, doors sighing open. Another lost soul would climb aboard, heavy with exhaustion, sadness, forgetting. Tessa wanted to scream at them, to warn them. But she had no voice anymore, only a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Outside, the city kept living, forgetting. Inside, the bus kept collecting, and it never, ever stopped. The end. Julian Reed first noticed something wrong the second he stepped into the building. The elevator skipped his floor. A half second of hesitation, a cheerful mechanical ding, and he sank past the 23rd story as if it no longer existed. The fluorescent lights inside the cab buzzed and flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to lean toward him. Julian stood boxed in sterile light, heart kicking at his ribs. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe. He pressed the button again. Nothing. The onboarding paperwork waited at his desk, thick, yellowed, and vibrating faintly at the edges, like heat shimmering above asphalt. An HR rep he didn't remember meeting before placed it neatly before him, smiling without smiling. His fingers trembled when he flipped through the first few pages. Each sheet dredged up some hidden, shameful moment. His first girlfriend's name, the letter he wrote begging her not to leave, tear-stained and desperate. The night he cried in a locked public bathroom. The petty theft from a corner store he never told anyone about. His grandfather's funeral, the sweat pooling under his arms as he struggled not to vomit from grief. Details so intimate they felt peeled from the inside of his skull. They shouldn't know any of this. No one should. He didn't sign. At first, it was subtle. People called him Jason or Jared and looked confused when he corrected them. His emails bounced back with errors. User not found. The vending machine swallowed his coins and whirred emptily. The lights above his cubicle flickered, sputtered, and finally went dark altogether, casting his workspace into a dull, permanent dusk. Colleagues stopped looking at him. When he tried to catch their eyes, their faces blurred at the edges like old, degrading photographs. At night, Julian dreamed of hallways that stretched forever, lined with doors that opened onto empty office chairs, each one spinning gently, endlessly, under a blood-red sky. One evening, disoriented by corridors that bent in impossible angles, Julian stumbled into a part of the building he'd never seen before. No windows, no sound, just endless rows of sagging metal cabinets, their surfaces crusted with dust and fingerprints that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. The air tasted metallic, heavy. A sour smell leaked from the vents, thickening with every breath. He opened a drawer at random. Thin folders whispered against each other. Each one was stamped with a name he didn't recognize and a thick black line crossing out a termination date. Some folders were thin as a single page, others bulged grotesquely. Julian yanked one at random and flipped it open. A woman's life compressed into terse lines, employment start date, termination date, signature. In the corner, a photo, but her face was nothing more than a blur of static. As he backed away, he bumped into a door that hadn't been there before. It swung open onto a sprawling office landscape, row after row of identical cubicles stretching farther than sight. Inside each one slumped a figure, faces smooth and blank, endlessly scribbling invisible paperwork. The walls pulsed like something alive. The carpet rippled under his feet, warm and wet like a tongue. He understood then. These forms didn't just record lives, they created them. They trapped people inside a reality stitched together by contracts and compliance. The building needed believers, needed signers, needed bodies. A man in a gray suit materialized from the shadows, faceless, his outline quivering and unstable. He held out a clipboard, fingers ending in inky points. "Sign here, Julian," he rasped. His voice was wrong, as if stitched together from 100 old voicemails. Julian turned and ran. Halls stretched endlessly before him, walls sagging inward like wet canvas. Elevator doors opened onto bottomless pits. Windows showed only endless gray static. The world unraveled around him, cubicles collapsing into sludge, ceiling panels falling like dead skin. He sprinted past offices where coworkers, if they could still be called that, sat bleeding black ink from empty sockets. Their bodies twitched in spasms, hands gripping pens that carved meaningless loops on empty paper. Gravity twisted. The floor tilted at sick angles. Julian clawed forward, screaming against the roaring silence that swallowed all sound. He crashed into his own cubicle, his last anchor point. The contract still lay there, heavy as lead. His name was smudging, fading, unwriting itself. Clutching the unsigned contract to his chest, Julian rocked back and forth, whispering his name like a prayer, like a shield. It didn't help. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered now. By morning, there was nothing left of him but an empty chair, a forgotten coffee cup, and a blank ID badge on the desk. The building buzzed and flickered like a dying insect nest. At exactly 9 a.m., the elevator opened again. A new temp stepped out, bright-eyed, clutching his resume, smoothing down his tie. He paused at the front desk, smiling nervously. The receptionist behind the counter looked up. Its face rearranged itself into something almost human. "Welcome," it said brightly. "We just need you to sign a few forms." Behind the smiling thing, down an endless hallway lined with empty chairs, the world waited to remake itself. The end. Ellie Rivers pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her front window, watching the sprinkler sputter across the patchy lawn. Summer was thick and slow in Crestwood Court, making even the faint hum of cicadas feel weighted. She needed quiet, healing. That's what the doctors said. Across the driveway, the other side of the duplex mirrored her own. Yellow siding, cracked steps, a sagging porch swing. From behind a lace curtain, a hand waved. Ellie forced a smile and waved back. Mrs. Langford was a kindly sort, white-haired, soft-voiced, always with a fresh-baked pie or a just-checking-in dear knock at the door. Ellie told herself it was harmless. Lonely, maybe. Like her. The first real slip came 3 weeks after moving in. Ellie found a framed photograph waiting on her porch, an old sun-faded snapshot of 2 little girls in matching sundresses, standing in front of the very house she now lived in. Her heart thudded. One of the girls looked unsettlingly like her. When she brought it back to Mrs. Langford, the old woman chuckled softly. "Oh, you always were forgetful, darling. You and my Lydia were thick as thieves." Ellie asked, stomach turning. "My daughter, bless her. She passed a few years ago, but you were like family, always here." Ellie blinked. She had never been to Crestwood Court before in her life. Later that night, she checked her phone, desperate for some anchor to reality. Her driver's license had been updated. Ellie Langford. Address 2412 Crestwood Court. Trembling, Ellie dug through her boxes, finding her old work ID, Ellie Rivers, Little Stars Daycare, but even that felt wrong in her hands, like holding a stranger's memories. The next day, she drove to the leasing office, heart hammering, papers clutched in sweaty fists. But the receptionist only smiled too brightly and said, "Oh, it's so nice you're helping your mother. She's lucky to have a daughter like you." Ellie ran back to her car, breathing fast, knuckles white against the steering wheel. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. But when she tried to leave town, the highway folded back on itself like a snake biting its tail. Exit after exit led back to Crestwood Court and Mrs. Langford's sagging porch swing. Each morning, Ellie woke with fewer memories. She could recall colors, yellow rain boots, red licorice, but not faces. She remembered smells, chlorine pools, musty library books, but not conversations. When she screamed at Mrs. Langford, when she hurled the photo frame into the street, the old woman only smiled patiently. "You're tired, Ellie. You always were a sensitive little thing. Why don't you come sit with me for a spell? Just like old times." Inside her own home, Ellie found new evidence. A school trophy labeled Lydia Langford Memorial Scholarship, awarded to Ellie Langford. A dusty photo album chronicling birthdays she didn't remember. Handwritten letters in her own looping script. "Dear Mom, sorry I stayed away so long." Each artifact whispered, "You belong here. You always did." The final crack came on a Sunday evening when the sun burned low behind the trees and the whole world seemed to exhale. Ellie stared at herself in the mirror. Her reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The woman in the mirror was older, grayer around the temples. Her mouth tugged into a familiar soft smile, a smile that belonged to Mrs. Langford. Ellie touched her face, fingertips trembling, and the reflection touched back with practiced ease. Mrs. Langford lived alone. She always had. There had been a daughter once, they said, a daughter who went missing, a daughter who forgot who lived next door. Ellie stepped outside in her slippers. The evening was warm, the cicadas slow and forgiving. Across the driveway, the porch swing creaked. Mrs. Langford patted the empty seat beside her. Without thinking, Ellie crossed over. The chair rocked as she sat down, joints popping gently. The stars came out overhead, and the streetlights blinked one by one. "That's better," Langford said, her voice low and satisfied. She reached over and clasped Ellie's hand, and Ellie, no Lydia, squeezed back. And as the crickets chirped and the breeze stirred the hydrangeas, the neighbors passed by and waved at the 2 women on the porch. They waved back with soft, identical smiles. And by morning, no one would remember Ellie Rivers at all. The end. The first time Peter Hahn visited the Market of Joy, he hadn't slept in 3 nights. The second time, he went back because he had. And that was the beginning of the end. It wasn't the colorful tents or the rustic barrels spilling with heirloom tomatoes that drew him in. It was the smells, bright, sharp citrus, a smoky roast, fresh basil cutting through the morning dew like a whisper. It reminded him of a time before insomnia hollowed him out, when food was joy instead of necessity. A woman with silver braids and an apron reading "Try Me," offered him a slice of melon. "It's free," she said, smiling so wide it made Peter's teeth itch. Polite instinct won out. He ate. Juice flooded his mouth, cloyingly sweet, almost chemical, and minutes later, driving home, he felt it, a slow unwinding. For the first time in what felt like years, Peter Hahn slept, deep, velvet sleep. When he woke, he cried. The next Sunday, he returned. The market seemed bigger now, stretching farther than he remembered, stalls blooming like mold across the empty lot. Vendors crowded the aisles, waving samples like carnival barkers. He tasted things he didn't even like, a leathery strip of spiced meat, a syrupy pear the color of polished brass. As he chewed, he noticed the vendors' eyes were bright, fevered, their smiles too eager, too fixed. He laughed it off. Anxiety, probably. His therapist warned him that stress bred hallucinations. But that night, Peter woke up standing barefoot on the curb outside his building, holding a bruised apple in his fist. He didn't remember leaving bed. He didn't remember eating the apple either. But the core was gone. The meat bitten down to brown, crumpled skin. He told himself it was a dream. Maybe he needed new meds. Maybe. At work, he stared blankly at spreadsheets, stomach growling with a strange, bottomless hunger. He went to lunch and found himself halfway across town before he realized he was driving toward the market. There were changes. The fruit smelled off, overly ripe, as if left too long in the sun. The tomatoes wept dark juices onto cracked wood tables. Still, the vendors offered samples with shining eyes and swollen grins. Peter saw a familiar face, Marcus Feld, a guy he once knew from the firm. Marcus looked thinner now, greasy. His polo shirt, bright yellow with "free taste," stitched across the chest, clung to him like second skin. "Pete," Marcus said, voice syrupy. "Good to see you, man. It's so much easier once you stop resisting." Peter backed away, heart hammering. That night, he blacked out again. When he woke, his mouth was stained purple, fingers sticky with some unidentifiable jam. He threw up in the sink. It tasted like burnt sugar and bile. Medical tests said he was clean. No drugs, no infections. His therapist suggested disassociation. Stress, grief over his divorce finally boiling over. But none of them saw the footage from his building's security camera. Peter, smiling too widely, lugging baskets of produce up to his apartment at 2 a.m. Peter setting up a folding table in the hallway, offering sliced fruits to passing neighbors, cooing, "Just a taste." Peter didn't remember any of it. He started seeing things. Graffiti on the brick walls near the market. "Feed your hunger" scratched deep into the mortar. "Consume and be consumed." He swore he heard whispers when he tried to sleep, cajoling him back to the market, a gentle, rotting chorus. Still, he fought. He stopped visiting, shut his blinds, ate nothing but prepackaged foods from chain grocery stores, drank only bottled water. The withdrawal hit fast and hard. Nausea, tremors, blinding headaches. His skin itched, crawled, burned, his mouth filled with phantom tastes, sweet rot, the metallic tang of undercooked meat. He hallucinated. Vines twisting up through his carpet, fruit bursting from the floorboards. Vendors outside his door, whispering through the keyhole. After 3 days, writhing in feverish agony, he broke. At dusk, Peter staggered to his car, drove blind, and found himself at the market. It was larger than ever now, sprawling over streets and alleys. Lights strung overhead glowed sickly yellow. Music played somewhere, high and thin, like a calliope grinding itself to death. The vendors waited. Peter barely noticed the smiling figures guiding him behind the stalls, where shadows twisted and laughed. He stumbled through an archway woven from drying corn stalks. Inside, men and women in yellow polos chanted softly, swaying in time. Someone in a long white coat spoke in a monotone. Behavioral compliance at 98%, neurological autonomy degradation successful. Peter thought he screamed then, but no one seemed to notice. The world folded inward. The next Sunday, Peter stood at stall 14 offering samples from a wicker basket brimming with glistening fruits. He smiled, the practiced, empty grin the others had taught him. His reflection in the puddle at his feet was distorted. Pale, slack-jawed, the eyes too bright, the teeth too perfect. A young mother paused in front of him, baby in tow. She looked uncertain. Peter leaned forward, the basket tilting invitingly. "Just a taste," he said, voice sweet and hollow. "It'll help you sleep." She hesitated. The baby reached, tiny fingers grasping. Peter smiled wider. The end. Nadine Carter barely skimmed the lease. The price was too good, the walls too clean, and the street outside lined with new cafes, all smelling of burnt coffee and paint thinner. It was exactly what she needed, a place close to the art district, a place where she could finally breathe. She clicked the pen against her thumb once, twice, then signed her name in the heavy black ink the landlord had provided. The man smiled too widely, teeth too white. She didn't ask why the last tenant had left. She didn't ask about the crumbling crown molding or the dark thumb-sized stain at the corner of the living room ceiling. She wanted to believe in new beginnings. That night, Nadine sat on the floor of her new living room, sketch pad balanced on her knees. The city outside her window buzzed like a living thing. Buses sighed, distant music thudded through walls, laughter trickled up from the street. She sketched without thinking, a crooked alleyway lined with shops, their windows dark, their doors warped by time. It wasn't a place she recognized, but her hand moved with certainty, pulling it from somewhere she couldn't name. The radiator hissed beside her, breathing warmth into the small space. Nadine leaned back, smiling faintly. This was her fresh start. She didn't notice the lease tucked behind her door, the fine print pulsing like a heartbeat against the old paper. A week passed. Nadine filled her walls with new paintings. Cities with bending streets, tiny bridges spanning black canals, houses slumping like they were tired of standing. Each day she woke up to find a fresh sketch on her desk, done in her own hand, though she couldn't remember drawing it. At first, she thought it was just exhaustion. Moving stress, maybe. She laughed it off with friends on the phone, though their voices sometimes cracked like radio static, and sometimes she couldn't remember who she had called at all. One morning, she pulled aside the heavy curtains and stared out her living room window. Instead of the sleek bakery across the street, there was a dusty tailor shop with a wooden sign swinging in the breeze. She blinked. The sign said Wickham & Sons, fine suits. Nadine rubbed her eyes hard. When she looked again, the bakery was back, its window full of sticky buns and sleekly groomed baristas. Maybe she was just overtired. Maybe she needed to eat something. That night, her boyfriend Leo came over, arms full of grocery bags and a bottle of wine. He kissed her forehead and joked about the apartment's weird vibes, the way doors creaked open by themselves, the way the lights sometimes flickered, even though the wiring was supposed to be new. She clung to him a little tighter than usual. Leo always made things feel solid. They cooked pasta and fell asleep on the couch, the bottle of wine half empty on the coffee table. As she drifted into sleep, Nadine thought she heard someone tapping at the window, soft as rain. When she woke up, the apartment was silent. Cold. Leo was gone. In his place sat a battered armchair she didn't remember owning, its cushions sagging like they'd held 1,000 different bodies. She called his name once, twice. Her voice felt strange in the empty room. Somewhere in the hallway, the radiator hissed and popped, breathing like something alive. Nadine spent the morning tearing the apartment apart, calling Leo's name until her throat hurt. She searched for his jacket, his shoes, his toothbrush. Nothing. Only the heavy armchair sat quietly by the window, the upholstery whispering when she brushed past it. Her phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. Hope you're settling in. Memories take time to adjust. Please enjoy your stay. Nadine dropped the phone like it had bitten her. She tried calling Leo, but every number in her contacts spun into endless static. The walls seemed closer than before. The kitchen doorway leaned slightly to the left. The light switches moved positions when she wasn't looking. She sketched feverishly, her hands stained with charcoal and ink, desperate to anchor herself. But the drawings were wrong. Places filled with crooked streets, dark rivers, hollowed buildings sinking into mud. One afternoon, she found a door in her hallway she didn't remember. Plain white wood, brass knob, no lock. It shouldn't be there. Her lease said 1 bedroom, 1 bath, no extra rooms. Heart pounding, Nadine pressed her ear against it. A soft shuffling sound came from the other side, like someone dragging their feet across a dusty floor. She backed away, slammed her bedroom door shut, pushed the dresser against it. But when she woke hours later, the strange door stood wide open, yawning into a room filled with yellow fog. Inside, she could almost see familiar shapes. Tables, windows, parks she thought she recognized from childhood but couldn't place. She stepped forward without meaning to. her body moving before her mind agreed. The fog smelled like rain on asphalt, like broken promises. A voice, warm and low, murmured from somewhere inside the mist, "Welcome home." Nadine turned and ran, heart slamming against her ribs, but the apartment stretched around her like melted wax, the walls sliding into shapes she couldn't name. The next morning, Nadine found an envelope pinned to her front door. Inside was a faded brochure. "Welcome to Evermere Property Management, preserving what was." Below it a paragraph. "Tenants provide a vital service by housing historic memory zones. All modifications are final. Leases renew automatically upon displacement or conscious rejection of environment." Dropped the paper. Her knees buckled. She sat hard on the cold floor. She understood now. Every painting she had made, every distorted street and sunken house, none of it had come from her imagination. They were implants, ghosts of neighborhoods flattened by progress, stitched into her mind to keep them alive. She wasn't Nadine Carter anymore, not fully. Piece by piece, her past was being erased and replaced. Leo's absence was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed again, displaying a new message. "Visit leasing office, lower level 0, final orientation required." She found the staircase where her laundry room used to be. It spiraled down and down, narrower with each turn, until she reached a door labeled simply "Office." Inside, a woman sat behind a cracked reception desk, typing on a keyboard without a monitor. Her face flickered, the features blurring like wet paint. "Welcome, Nadine," the woman said without looking up. "Sign here to complete the transition. Resistance will result in fragmentation." A single sheet of paper lay before her. A lease. Her name already printed at the bottom. Her hands shook. She could feel something inside her shifting, splitting. If she signed, she would forget she ever resisted. If she didn't, she might splinter apart entirely, trapped between histories that weren't hers. Nadine picked up the pen. Her hand moved almost on its own, the ink sinking into the page like blood into sand. When Nadine opened her eyes, she was back in her apartment. The walls gleamed fresh white. The hardwood floors shone like mirrors. A basket of muffins sat on the kitchen counter, still warm. Through the window, a quiet, perfect street stretched out. Cobblestone sidewalks, iron lampposts, shop fronts with hand-painted signs. She recognized none of it, but a part of her, deep and buzzing like a trapped fly, insisted she had lived here all her life. There were no paintings on the walls now, no sketches waiting on her desk. Just a new lease pinned neatly to her front door, waiting for her signature. It was dated 5 years ago. In the far corner of the room, the battered armchair sat quietly, watching. Nadine smiled, polite and empty, and went to make coffee. Somewhere behind the apartment walls, something exhaled, a deep, contented sigh. Outside, the streetlight flickered, and the world turned slightly to the left. The end. Jordan Price checked the time. 2:53 a.m. Only 7 minutes until he could clock out and never see this dump again. He pulled his jacket tighter. Somewhere above the crumbling food court, the speakers coughed out a ragged, off-key version of "Deck the Halls." The mall was empty except for him, or it should have been. He swung by the last security checkpoint. The rumors had started 2 weeks ago, half joking. "Don't volunteer for final shift. Every 10 years, someone doesn't leave." Mall rats whispered about it when they thought the managers weren't listening. Jordan hadn't cared. $10 an hour was $10 an hour, and screw ghost stories. At 3 a.m., Jordan made his way to the main entrance. The heavy glass doors resisted his push. He frowned, pressed harder. The door swung open onto another hallway lined with storefronts. The same mall, but not quite. The lights inside were dimmer. The carpet was threadbare, sticky underfoot. He stepped back, heart skidding in his chest. Behind him, the background music warbled, the tempo dragging until the lyrics dissolved into garbled sobbing. He tried another exit, same thing. Another hallway, another broken version of the mall, crumbling in a way that felt wrong, hungry. The mannequins inside the darkened stores shifted. One had its hand pressed against the glass now, palm flattened, as if trying to touch him. Jordan stumbled backward. An overhead monitor blinked on, static buzzing, and then a face appeared, his face, weeping. The tears on the screen looked black. He ran. Panting, Jordan found himself back at the food court, but it wasn't the same. Grease stains bloomed like mold across the cracked tiles. A cardboard cutout of a burger mascot slumped sideways, face half torn, revealing splintered wood beneath. Somewhere, a child's voice laughed, sharp, mean, echoing. He turned a corner and saw himself. In the Claire's jewelry store window, two children argued over who had broken a snow globe. Jordan froze. That was him. He recognized his own scrawny frame, his sister's wild, tear-streaked face, his voice, "I didn't mean to." His father's shadow loomed larger, and then the memory looped, jerking back like a broken tape. Every store showed something. His mother sobbing into a cracked phone receiver. Jordan, 18, suitcase slung over his shoulder, shouting, "I don't care!" before the door slammed. His face again, smaller this time, sitting alone on a Greyhound bus, pretending not to cry. The mannequins watched, their heads tilting at angles no human neck could allow. Jordan pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart stumble. The mall wasn't just showing him memories, it was feeding. He smashed a display case with his elbow. Blood welled up instantly. The pain was sharp, grounding, but the mannequins smiled now, faintly. Their mouths had been painted closed before. Now thin cracks stretched at the corners. The exit signs blinked on and off, stuttering red light across rotted benches and dead plants. Jordan sprinted for the nearest emergency stairwell. It opened with a shriek and revealed not stairs, but another mall. This one was darker still, the air thick and warm, carrying the smell of mildew and old meat. He stumbled into a security office, walls plastered with dusty screens. The monitors flickered with footage, employees mopping floors, sweeping halls, locking up, and then, one by one, vanishing. Only the cameras remained, watching empty corridors. In the corner of one screen, a figure slumped against a wall, head sagging forward, plastic sheen to its skin. The mall didn't kill, it consumed, recycled, repurposed. Jordan stared at the footage until the figure on the screen lifted its head and smiled at him. "No," Jordan whispered. He grabbed a chair and hurled it at the monitors. Sparks spat and died. He staggered back into the food court, the rot thicker now, black vines threading across the floors. The air buzzed with unseen flies. Mannequins clustered in doorways, blocking escape, their glassy eyes gleaming. Fire, he thought. If he couldn't run, he'd burn the damn place down. He tore down garlands and plastic trees, doused them in lighter fluid stolen from a janitor's closet. The flames caught greedily, leaping upward, vomiting thick smoke. The mannequins convulsed but did not retreat. The mall's bones groaned and shifted, a low, greedy sound. The fire peeled away the tile in the center of the atrium, exposing a yawning hole. A staircase spiraled downward, impossibly deep, carved into rough, damp stone. Jordan didn't hesitate. Better down than stuck. He ran for the stairs as the mannequins surged forward, reaching with melted fingers. He descended, smoke coiling behind him, swallowing the last light. Down here there were no speakers, no music, only the sound of water dripping, slow and endless. The stairwell ended in blackness. Jordan stumbled through abandoned shops, smaller, older, as if belonging to another century. Dust choked the air. The mannequins here were skeletal, crumbling, frozen mid-scream. He called out once. Only his echo answered. His limbs grew heavier with each step, skin tightening painfully. He touched his face. It was stiff, wrong. In a shattered display window, he saw himself. His eyes had gone glossy, glass-like. His mouth was fixed in a silent scream he could not release. Somewhere above, the escalators whirred to life. Another final shift, another volunteer. Jordan turned, or tried to. His body no longer obeyed. When the next poor soul wandered too far, he would be waiting, forever posed, another ghost inside the mall that never closed. The end. The condemned wing of the airport groaned with every gust of midnight wind, a skeletal thing awaiting demolition. Maria Jensen, clipboard tucked under her arm, moved through it alone. Her footsteps echoed down abandoned corridors plastered with faded posters. "Welcome to Gateway International." The lost and found was tucked into a corner behind an unlit security kiosk. Boxes stacked like tombstones, a final inventory before the demolition crews swept it all into oblivion. That was Maria's job now. She found the suitcase wedged beneath a broken luggage carousel. No airline tag, no claim ticket, no date. The surface was battered leather, scuffed and cracked, smelling faintly of rain and something sweetly rotten. Protocol said unmarked items should be sealed and documented, then destroyed. But Maria's hand hesitated on the tape. Something about the suitcase tugged at her, a whisper of familiarity. She snapped the latches open. Inside, neatly arranged, a red flannel shirt she had folded 100 times, her husband's battered paperback copy of Dune, his old airport staff ID, and, at the very bottom, a small wooden box. Her breath snagged. She had buried that box with him. Her fingers brushed the wood, and the airport lights flickered. The silence thickened. Somewhere deep in the walls, a public announcement system crackled to life and died mid-sentence. Maria slammed the suitcase shut. Maybe it was exhaustion, grief. She hadn't been sleeping, not really. Working nights after Robert's death had become a habit. Nights felt less real, easier. She set the suitcase on the inventory table and forced herself to continue. Item after item, umbrellas, abandoned scarves, dolls with cracked porcelain faces, each tagged and sealed. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. Instinct made her answer. Hello? Static. Then Robert's voice, soft, strangled. Where are you? Maria staggered back from the table, his heart battering her ribs. The line went dead. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped the phone. The overhead lights flickered again, and the security monitor across the room, long dormant, buzzed to life. A black and white feed blinked onto the screen. Maria froze. There she was, standing at the far end of the corridor, watching herself. Her double lifted a hand, waved once, then disappeared as the feed cut out. Maria clutched the edge of the table to steady herself. Grief. Exhaustion. Not real. She grabbed her clipboard, determined to finish the inventory and get the hell out. But the layout had changed. Corridors bent impossibly now. Escalators climbed into ceilings, gates labeled in non-existent letters. She walked back the way she'd come, or thought she had, only to find herself in front of the lost and found again. The suitcase waiting atop the table, open. The box was gone. Panic boiled up in her chest. She fumbled for her ID badge and headed toward the main security doors. They slid closed just before she reached them. A flat, mechanical voice announced, "Access denied. Unknown entity." Maria slapped the badge against the reader again and again until her palm stung. "Please," she whispered. The lights dimmed. The intercom crackled again. "You left me behind," Robert's voice said. "Closer now." "Sad," Maria whispered. "I didn't." She turned and the world shifted. Corridors warped into spirals. Monitors flickered frames of herself, not in real time but in possibilities. Maria working, Maria sleeping, Maria weeping. And in every frame, the suitcase sat open beside her. The overhead announcements twisted into incoherent words. Lost, found, forgotten. Somewhere she caught a glimpse of herself again, only not quite herself. Sallow skin, blank, glassy eyes, carrying the suitcase deeper into the terminal. Maria ran. Doors slammed shut ahead of her. Pathways collapsed into blind ends. No matter how she turned, she circled back to the inventory room. The suitcase waited. A soft voice murmured from inside it. "You can see him again. Just pack away your memories. We'll hold them safe." She stepped backward, but her heel caught on something, a loose floor tile, and she fell hard. When she looked up, a figure stood over her. Another Maria. Expressionless, mechanical, clipboard in hand, ticking off inventory items one by one. The real Maria, if she was still real, scrambled to her feet. She tried screaming for help, but her voice came out a hoarse whisper. The new Maria didn't even glance her way. She simply continued the task Maria had started, efficiently, endlessly, as if Maria had never been here at all. The suitcase snapped shut by itself. The lights went out. When they came for demolition a week later, the condemned wing was empty. No workers, no inventory, only dust motes swirling in the morning sun. A lone clipboard sat atop the lost and found table. One name left on the inventory list, written in shaky black ink, Maria Jensen, unclaimed. In the shadows behind the boarded gates, if you listen very carefully, you can still hear the faint flicker of old monitors. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to be alone past midnight, you'll see her, moving in the corners of the cameras, waiting for someone who no longer exists. The end. The first thing Christopher Doyle noticed was the smell, wet concrete and iron filings. The second was the faces, hundreds of them, all eerily similar. His face at different ages, framed by harsher or softer lives. The man who spoke to him was an older version, lines clawing his cheeks, eyes sunk deep. "You can't leave until you find yourself," he said, and the others nodded, like it was the only truth they had left. Christopher stumbled backward, hit a rough concrete wall. The hallway stretched in both directions, stitched together with scaffolding and rebar. Dim industrial lights swung overhead, casting shadows that seemed too slow to follow their hosts. He didn't remember getting here. Last thing he knew, he was standing in his office, staring at a half-finished model of his newest brutalist nightmare. Now this. They called it the Foundation. "It's always unfinished," Elder Chris said. "Because we are." When he asked how to escape, Elder Chris only smiled sadly. "Find your real memory, find your real self, or stay forever." As he wandered, Christopher realized the complex was alive. Corridors shifted, staircases sank into the floor, doors appeared and vanished. It was like walking through a dream remembered wrong. At first, he thought the others were hallucinations. But when he bumped into a 20-something version of himself, one with paint-smeared jeans and an old sketchbook, he knew better. "You sold me out," young Chris said, voice trembling with fury. "You traded this," he slapped the sketchbook, "for concrete and cold air." Christopher tried to deny it, but the memory was already blooming. The long nights drafting for greedy developers, telling himself it was just for now, just until he had time. Time never came. He built prisons for people's lives and called them homes. The corridor narrowed, walls pressing inward. Christopher shoved past the young man and ran. Behind him, someone whispered, "Coward." Hours, or maybe days later, Christopher found himself standing before a half-collapsed stairwell. He climbed, each step groaning under his weight. About halfway up, a man blocked his path. This Chris was thicker, heavier, bitterness weighing him down. "You can't go up," the bitter Chris said. "You gave up. Don't pretend you didn't." They fought. It wasn't cinematic, just two tired men clawing and biting. Bitter Chris grunted and thrashed, but Christopher managed to shove him over the side. The body fell with a wet crack far below. For a long moment, Christopher sat on the stairs, panting, listening to the distant echoes of his own violence. Above him, the stairwell twisted upward into darkness. The foundation decayed faster now. Walls bled black water, lights flickered out in chains. Each new hallway was worse than the last, sagging like the ribs of a dying animal. He saw others sometimes, versions of himself curled into corners, sobbing or wandering blank-eyed through collapsed rooms. He didn't stop to help them. Somewhere deep inside he understood. If he lost focus, if he cared too much, he'd end up like them. Another crumbling fixture in the endless labyrinth. When he stumbled into a courtyard-like space, lit by a single flickering bulb, he found the last obstacle. It was a child. No, himself, at maybe 7 years old. Holding a battered model airplane, the plastic kind he used to spend hours gluing together in his bedroom. The boy smiled shyly. "You came back," he said. Christopher's knees almost buckled. He remembered that plane. He remembered the dream, to design real things, not walls to trap people in, but wings to lift them up. "I forgot about you," Christopher whispered. The boy's smile faltered. "You forgot everything," the boy said. Around them, the foundation creaked and shuddered, chunks of concrete breaking loose from unseen ceilings above. Christopher knew the rules. He remembered Elder Chris's voice. "Only one of you leaves." He sank to his knees, tears streaking the dirt on his face. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. The boy held out the model airplane like a peace offering. "You don't have to," the boy said. "You can remember, you can be better." Christopher reached out. For a moment, their hands almost touched. Then he closed his eyes and swung the rusted rebar he'd grabbed from the debris. It made a dull sound, like hitting wet clay. When he opened his eyes, the boy was gone. So was the model airplane. Only a cracked floor and a spreading puddle of red remained. The world roared. The foundation collapsed inward, folding like a dying lung. The stairwell opened above him, a broken line of ascent, shivering and shaking. He ran, fell, clawed his way upward. Concrete cracked under his hands. His shoulders screamed. His vision narrowed to a single point of light high above. He reached it just as the last staircase gave way. The surface was blinding. A flat, endless white sky stretched overhead. There was no sun, no warmth, no buildings. Only him. Christopher stood there, gasping, blood on his hands, pieces of memory falling away like flakes of dead skin. He had survived. But when he looked at his reflection in a puddle of white water, he saw a face he didn't recognize anymore. The foundation hadn't been a place. It had been him, every broken piece of him, screaming not to be forgotten. He had silenced them all. And now he was alone. Utterly, finally alone. The end. Megan Holt sipped her burnt coffee without tasting it, her mind elsewhere. Rain dribbled down the windows of the coffee shop in skinny rivers, blurring the gray world outside. The place smelled of wet wool and bitter espresso. She tapped her laptop, scrolling through a dead-end article draft. Another scandal, another official lying through their teeth. It all felt mechanical now. 34 years old, award-winning investigative journalist, and still feeling like a girl standing in the middle of a storm without an umbrella. Megan barely remembered her childhood anymore. Just broken flashes, a yellow swing set, the smell of something burning, cold metal hospital beds. After her parents died, foster homes had passed her around like a charity box. She didn't bother trying to recall more. Some doors were better left closed. The coffee shop door chimed. Megan glanced up lazily and froze. A man stood there, scanning the room, early 40s maybe, heavy coat, rain dripping from the sleeves. His eyes met hers, and a smile broke across his face, a wide, knowing smile, like he had just found a long-lost friend. Without asking, he slid into the chair across from her. "Meggie," he said warmly, using a name nobody had called her in decades. "It's been too long." Megan blinked. The stranger leaned closer, as if expecting her to laugh, to embrace him. His voice was familiar, but not enough. Like a song she almost knew the words to, but couldn't quite sing along. She forced a polite, cautious smile. "Sorry. Have we met?" The man's face fell, but only for a second. Then he chuckled and shook his head, as if teasing a child. "Always the joker," he said. "Of course you remember me." Megan closed her laptop slowly, her heartbeat picking up for reasons she couldn't name. Outside, the rain thickened into a steady drumming, muffling the world. Megan stood outside the coffee shop a few minutes later, umbrella forgotten at her side, the man's voice echoing in her ears. "Don't worry, Meggie. Memories come back when you're ready." She hadn't said goodbye, just mumbled an excuse and fled. His name? He hadn't even given it. Or maybe he had, and somehow she hadn't heard. 2 days later, her inbox pinged with a new email. "Good to see you again. Lunch soon?" No address, no signature, no sender. The email was dated, bizarrely, from 10 years ago. Megan shook it off. Maybe a glitch, maybe a prank. Still, she changed her passwords and triple-checked her security settings. It got worse. At her sister's birthday dinner, Megan flipped through an old photo album Claire had dug out for laughs. Halfway through, Megan froze. A photograph, maybe from when she was 12, showed her and Claire in a sunlit park. And there, arms slung around their shoulders, was him. Same lopsided smile. Same raincoat, oddly. "God, you two were thick as thieves," Claire said, smiling warmly. "Remember when you dared him to climb the water tower?" Megan's stomach dropped. Who is that?" Claire looked at her strangely. "Very funny. You know it's Noah." Megan laughed shakily, snapping the album shut. Her hands trembled, just a little. She did not know any Noah. Megan didn't sleep much after that. Some nights she woke up to the creak of the hallway floorboards, half dreaming that someone was pacing outside her door. When she dared to check, nothing was there. But sometimes she swore she smelled damp rain, the heavy, earthy scent of wet pavement seeping under the door. At work, it got worse. Articles she knew she had written disappeared from her computer. In their place were half-finished essays about summer camp memories and high school pranks, events she never lived through, with Noah's name woven casually into every paragraph. One evening, desperate, she dug out her old childhood journals from a battered box in her closet. The ink had faded, but the words were sharp enough to wound. "Noah says I'll always be brave, even if I forget someday. Noah says the hospital wasn't my fault." Megan slammed the journal shut. Tears stung her eyes, not from sadness, but from a rising terror she couldn't explain. When she looked up, she saw her own reflection in the dark window. For a moment, just a flash, she thought there was someone standing behind her. smiling. When she blinked, the room was empty. But the smell of rain lingered. She confronted him in the coffee shop a week later. Or maybe he had arranged for her to find him. She wasn't sure anymore. "Noah," she said through gritted teeth, the name tasting foreign in her mouth. "What did you do to me?" He looked almost sad, almost. "You're remembering now. It's good," he said gently. "The process was harder on you than most." Megan sat down, legs trembling. "What process?" Noah leaned closer. The smell of rain clung to him like a second skin. "You were part of a trial, Meggie. After the accident, you were perfect." His voice was almost loving. "We gave you a better past, one without all that pain." Megan shook her head violently. "You're lying." He placed a small recorder on the table, pressed play. A girl's voice cracking with fear. "Please, I'll believe whatever you want. Just make it stop." Her voice. Megan's vision blurred. In a sickening rush, missing pieces clicked into place. The clinics, the whispered promises, the endless gray corridors. "You're almost ready," Noah said warmly. "Soon, Megan Holt will just fade." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was a pale, washed-out white, empty of clouds, of light, of everything. Inside her mind, things were going missing too. One by one. Weeks passed, though Megan wasn't sure anymore if she was counting days or memories. Photos on her walls rearranged themselves when she wasn't looking. New ones appeared. Birthday parties, vacations, all with Noah smiling warmly by her side. Her sister never answered calls. Friends she remembered didn't seem to exist anymore, only people she didn't know, greeting her like old companions. One morning, standing in front of her mirror, Megan tried to say her name. Meg. The rest crumbled before it left her lips. She smiled weakly at the reflection, a stranger wearing her face. Behind her, Noah waited patiently. "Ready for breakfast?" he asked. She nodded. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice screamed, but it was distant now, like a dream forgotten before waking. Outside, the world was sunny and clean. No more rain. Inside, Megan Holt was gone. Only the new girl remained. The end. Anthony Vega first noticed the road was wrong when the sun never shifted. It hung low and golden behind his rental's dusty windshield, as if someone had painted the sky and forgotten to move the brush. The town sign rose out of nowhere. Mallow's End, ST 1857, where everyone belongs. He meant to pass through, take a few shots. Note the old brick storefronts, the carved wooden benches, the tidy white steeple of the church. He had seen a dozen towns like it, hollowed by time and memory. But this one felt different, stubborn in its perfection. Anthony parked outside a general store with creaking steps. An old man in suspenders leaned against a hitching post that should have rotted away decades ago. "Festival's tomorrow," the man said. "You'll stay, won't you?" Anthony smiled politely, tapping the camera slung across his neck. Just passing through. He turned to leave and found himself back at the welcome sign. Confused, he shook it off. Small towns could be tricky. Winding roads, bad signage. He tried again, took a different turn. A dirt path bordered by dry cornfields. The fields closed in tight, whispering against the car. Blink. Anthony's hands tightened on the wheel. His camera bag was on the passenger seat again. The road unwound before him, neat and perfect, leading straight back to Main Street. Locals waved, children laughed, tossing old-fashioned paper hats into the air. The old man was back by the post, smiling wider this time. "You'll stay, won't you?" he said again. Anthony didn't answer. He pressed harder on the gas. He reviewed his photos that night in the town's single motel, heart-pounding. Shots of the parade, the laughing children, the apple-bobbing contests. But in every frame he saw himself too, smiling with the townsfolk, arm around the baker, shaking hands with the sheriff. He hadn't posed for any of them. Another attempt to leave the next morning ended the same. A stretch of empty highway, the creeping fields, then darkness. A stuttering lapse of time. The next moment, Anthony was back at the square, watching as booths were hammered together for the Harvest Festival. His memories bled around the edges. His brother's voice on the phone last week. What had they talked about? His editor's sharp laugh. What was the last assignment? He rubbed his face, feeling unfamiliar stubble. A thought pressed against the inside of his skull. Stay too long, and they'll know you. In the library, A squat stone building without a computer in sight, he found it. A photo album, thick, dusty, smelling of mildew and something sweeter, rotting underneath. Black and white photographs at first, stiff figures in formal dress. As he flipped forward, the images sharpened, became color. Names written in neat, old-fashioned cursive. Mrs. Calloway, Festival Queen, 1919. Mr. Abrams, Parade Grand Marshal, 1947. In the latest pages, faces blurred unnaturally, like smeared oil paintings. Men and women he had never seen, but who felt familiar in a way that made Anthony's stomach knot. Tucked into the binding was a slip of paper, cracked and yellow. Leave before they name you. Stay, and you are theirs. The back door slammed. Anthony jumped, heart hammering, but no one entered. Only the creak of the wooden floorboards, as if someone had been there and left. By twilight, the festival was in full swing. Lanterns swung from poles, casting sickly yellow light. Laughter chimed brittle and thin. Children in blank white masks skipped in circles. Someone grabbed Anthony's arm. The sheriff, smiling too hard, too wide. "You haven't tried the cider yet. Can't leave without a taste." Anthony wrenched free and ran. The air grew thick, syrupy. Every step dragged like running underwater. Faces blurred past, faces he almost knew, faces that felt stitched into the lining of his mind. He crossed the town square, pushing through the crowd, knocking over tables. The forest edge shimmered ahead. Branches clawed at the sky like desperate hands. If he could just get past the trees, if he could just blink. Music. A parade. Anthony stood atop a float decked in dried corn stalks. Around his neck, the ceremonial sash weighed like a chain. His face was frozen into a smile he couldn't feel. Cameras flashed, streamers floated. He waved because that was what they wanted, because now he belonged. Months later, Anthony's photos made the rounds online. An anonymous portfolio titled Forgotten America. Critics praised the haunting images, a timeless town, a joyful festival, a sense of nostalgia that stung. No one asked who had taken them. No one wondered why the smiling man in the center of every frame never had a name attached. And outside Mallow's End, another car slowed as it approached the town sign, where golden sunlight bathed the world in a false, perfect glow. Mallow's End, S. 1857, where everyone belongs. The fields whispered, the road folded inward, the town waited, the end. Lydia Chen tugged her hoodie tighter and stepped onto the late-night bus. Rain slapped the windows, thick and mean. The driver, a hunched man with a drooping cap, barely glanced at her as she paid. Every seat was taken, except the last row. 5 seats, completely empty, like a missing tooth in a crowded mouth. A woman in the front clutched Lydia's sleeve. Her eyes were wide, shining like wet stones. "Don't sit there," she whispered. Lydia blinked. "Why?" But the woman just shook her head and turned away, hands trembling in her lap. The driver barked, "Move it!" The bus growled underfoot, impatient. With no choice, Lydia hurried to the back and dropped into the last seat by the window. The cushion sagged under her. The air smelled different here, old, sour, like breath caught in a jar. The bus pulled away from the curb. The city blurred past. Lydia closed her eyes for a moment and opened them to find the bus nearly empty. The sky outside was darker than before. Wrong, somehow. Thick and pulsing, like it might fall on the bus and crush it flat. She sat up straight. The woman who warned her was gone. The bus driver was someone else now, taller, with a neck that seemed too long, stretching unnaturally as he peered into the rearview mirror at her. Lydia twisted in her seat. The other passengers sat frozen, their faces slack. No blinking, no breathing. She tried to stand, but the bus jerked, tossing her back into the sagging seat. At the next stop, the door side opened. Mist curled in. A man stepped on, his suit soaked and clinging to his body. He shuffled to a seat without looking up. The man's hands were wrong. Too many fingers, too thin, twitching like broken spiders. Lydia's stomach lurched. She fumbled for her phone. No service. She closed her eyes again, blinked. The bus was full again, but it wasn't the same. Everyone's faces were different. Features blurred like clay smeared by careless hands. Whispers floated through the aisle. "You shouldn't have sat there. It always starts with the last row." She pressed her hands to her ears, but the whispers slid inside anyway, like smoke. Another stop. This time, the landscape outside wasn't a city. It was fields of black grass under a blood-colored sky. No houses, no roads, no stars, just the endless, gnashing dark. Passengers shuffled off the bus. Each one left behind a faint shadow in their seat, a smudge that twitched and moaned. Lydia clutched the armrest. "I want to get off," she said, voice hoarse. The driver, if it could still be called that, smiled into the rearview mirror. His teeth were long and thin and far too many. "Last row rides till the end," he said. The bus roared forward. Each time she blinked, Lydia lost more. She forgot her phone pin. She forgot her best friend's face. She forgot what city she had started in. She forgot why she had ever boarded this bus at all. The seats around her began to rot, splitting at the seams. The passengers slumped lower, their skin sloughing off in gray sheets. Something heavy pressed against her chest, pinning her to the seat. A weight like sorrow or drowning. She could still move her head. She turned toward the window. The glass showed not her reflection, but a different version of herself. Older, hollow-eyed, with skin like damp paper. Her other self mouthed words Lydia couldn't hear. Her hands scrabbled at the glass, leaving wet, red streaks. The window cracked, spiderwebbing out from the center. At the next stop, something climbed aboard. It didn't have a shape, not really. It was a writhing mess of limbs and mouths, all stitched together by twitching threads of hunger. It shuffled past Lydia. She held her breath. It didn't look at her. Not yet. The bus groaned and rattled and drove on. The final stop never came. Time stretched into a thin, nauseous string. Lydia forgot how to count it. She forgot her own name. Something cold and slimy brushed her hand. She flinched and looked down. The seat beside her was no longer empty. A boy sat there, maybe 10 years old, with black eyes that took up half his face. His mouth was sewn shut. His shirt was wet with blood. He held out his hand to her. Help. Or doom. She didn't know anymore. Tears burned her eyes. She took the boy's hand. The bus screamed, a sound of tearing metal and breaking souls, and lurched violently. For the first time, Lydia was thrown free from the seat. She hit the aisle hard, scrambled up, ran. The bus was endless now. Rows upon rows of seats stretched back forever. Passengers stared without seeing, stitched into their places. She ran and ran and ran, but no matter how far she ran, she was always still in the last row. The driver turned his too long neck to grin at her again. "Nowhere to go," he said. His voice was full of sand and broken glass. Lydia stumbled back to her seat. She curled into a ball, hugging her knees to her chest. Through the shattered window, she saw herself, every version she had ever been, pressed against the other side, watching, weeping, waiting. The bus drove on, it would always drive on, and Lydia would always be in the last row. A splinter caught outside of time, a passenger on a ride that had no end, a girl who had forgotten she was ever anything else. The end. Evan Marks had never believed in ghosts. In his 45 years, he'd trusted steel, concrete, and the laws of physics to hold the world upright. Not unseen things, not whispers in the dark, but even before they lost the light, Evan heard the breathing. The first day underground had gone as expected. The crew, 4 men, 1 woman, counting Evan, had surveyed the older subway lines for expansion possibilities. Evan lectured about air pressure shifts and architectural fatigue as faint tapping echoed in the distance. "Settling noises," he said, waving his laser level like a wand. Nothing more. The second day, radios sputtered with static, and the distant tapping turned into something that sounded suspiciously like footsteps. Evan joked about it. "The ghosts of unpaid overtime," he said, and the crew chuckled uneasily. Deep under the city, jokes had sharp edges. That night, the tunnel changed. No cracks split the walls. No bombs shook the earth. And yet, the blueprint they followed, a century-old relic, no longer matched what lay ahead. Hallways turned, sloped, split into unfamiliar branches. "You sure about this route, boss?" Taylor, his youngest surveyor, asked. Evan checked the map again. North should be straight ahead, but the compass needle spun, dizzy and untrustworthy. "Old ironworks," Evan muttered. "Nothing we can't handle." They pressed forward. The breathing grew louder. By day 3, the crew's lights dimmed faster than their batteries should have allowed. Evan's voice, confident and crisp at first, became clipped, then ragged. At the rear of the group, Mateo fell behind. One minute he was there, boots scuffing concrete. The next, only silence. They searched for hours, backtracking, calling, shining lights into endless black corridors. Nothing, not even an echo. We mark this place and keep moving. Evan said, though his hand trembled when he scribbled Mateo's name on the tunnel wall with a piece of chalk. The chalk broke. The sound echoed 5, 10, 15 times from places they hadn't walked. On day 4, they found the first changes in themselves. Freeman, the oldest of them, kept scratching at his skin until he bled, muttering about pressure sores. And Gina, the only woman, stopped speaking entirely, her eyes fixed always just over Evan's shoulder, staring at something he refused to turn and see. Their boots slapped uneven rhythms against the stone floor. But the echoes behind them didn't match. Something followed, not walking with them, but catching up. "You'll hear them before you see them," Freeman said once, voice barely above a whisper. "That's how you know you're next." And sure enough, Freeman was gone the next morning. His hard hat and flashlight were left neatly stacked beside a corroded water pipe. By day 5, Evan stopped looking for exits. The labyrinth wasn't trying to kill them. No, it needed them, needed him. The walls breathed subtly at first, a slow expansion and contraction like the lungs of something massive and buried alive. It wasn't just hallucination. The cracks in the stone stretched and puckered like lips. When Evan pressed a hand to the wall, it felt warm, wet. "We're in the old lines," he told himself, voice bouncing and splitting in the tunnels. Humidity, natural phenomena. But deep down, something crumbled. The part of him that had laughed at ghost stories had believed blueprints couldn't bleed. Taylor went next, 1 second ahead of Evan, leading the way with a trembling flashlight. Then a slurping wet sound, and Taylor was gone. Evan didn't even see it happen. Only the light falling and vanishing into the floor like a coin into a slot. Evan was alone. He sat down against the wall, chest heaving. But even breathing hurt now. Every breath scraped against his ribs like jagged rebar. "Old accidents," he murmured, rocking slightly. His voice echoed back, but wrong, coming from angles no walls could logically reflect. All those projects he'd signed off on, rubber stamping rushed blueprints without asking why sections had been abandoned. Ghosts of negligence, ghosts of arrogance. When he moved again, it wasn't because he had a plan. It was because the breathing walls whispered to him now, urging, calling. He stumbled into a grand hall that shouldn't have existed. An unfinished station, tiled and clean, but hollow-eyed. Piles of rebar twisted into grotesque shapes in the corners, some disturbingly close to human form. At the center stood an empty platform. As Evan approached, the platform shifted, growing, stretching, a stage prepared just for him. His hands itched. Looking down, he saw his fingertips elongating into thin steel-gray filaments. His palms cracked, skin drying and stiffening like poured cement. "No," he said weakly. "No, no, no!" The echoes answered, thousands of versions of his own voice, each warped and gleeful. "No, no, no!" He turned to run, but the tunnels spun, a vortex of slick stone and living brick. Every path led back to the platform. He fell to his knees, screaming. His voice shattered into a million tiny echoes, bouncing forever through halls that didn't exist on any human map. Above him, the platform cracked open, revealing a dark shaft plunging deeper than sound could travel. As he knelt, bones stiffening, breath slowing, he finally understood. Survival wasn't about escaping. It was about becoming part of the city's endless hunger. The last thing he heard before the walls closed in was breathing, not his own. The end. The house looked smaller in the daylight. Natalie Warren stood at the cracked iron gates, staring up at the crooked lines of the abandoned mansion she had bought on a whim. Gray paint peeled like old skin from the siding. The windows, though boarded, seemed to glint back at her as if watching. She shivered and blamed it on the cold. A new start, she reminded herself. A place to heal. A place to create again. The realtor had called it a fixer-upper, but Natalie saw potential. Wide, arched ceilings perfect for painting murals, dusty hallways begging to be filled with sculptures. After the months she spent in the hospital, the whispering corridors, the cold-eyed doctors, this house was freedom. Her boots crunched across the gravel drive as she approached the front door. The brass knocker, shaped like a lion's head, was heavier than it looked. It fell against the door with a hollow thud that seemed to echo deeper than the walls. When she pushed the door open, the scent of dust and old wood wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She didn't see the narrow stairwell tucked behind the front closet, or the second door where there should have been none. Not yet. Natalie crossed the threshold and smiled, tasting hope and something else on the stale air. Behind her, the door swung shut on its own. The first room she found wasn't on any blueprint. Natalie had spent the morning pulling up cracked floorboards in the front hall, her hands raw from the splinters. She wanted to clear the way for the sunlight to spill in, make it feel less like a tomb. When she leaned against the hallway wall to rest, she heard it, a soft, hollow knock behind the plaster. Curious, she fetched a hammer and began tapping along the wall. The sound changed near the coat closet, thin and empty like a whisper in an empty jar. Her heart gave a little jolt. She pulled aside the old coats and found, almost laughing at how obvious it was, a second door set into the wall. It didn't match the rest of the house. It was newer, white, clean-lined, with a small brass doorknob shaped like a teardrop. She touched it, hesitated, and pushed it open. The room beyond was small and square. Dust floated in the shaft of light from a narrow window. On the far wall she saw it, a mural, faded but unmistakable. A crooked tree against a bleeding orange sky. Natalie stumbled back. She knew this tree. She had drawn it once, in a notebook she kept hidden under her bed when she was 15 years old. A sketch she hadn't thought about in over 20 years. The air in the room smelled wrong, sour and metallic. And when she turned away, she thought she saw the tree's branches twitch just a little in the corner of her eye. By the time she closed the door, her hands were shaking. She told herself it was just coincidence. Old houses were full of surprises. But that night, as she drifted into a shallow, fitful sleep upstairs, she heard soft footsteps pacing in the hall below, and she knew she had locked every door. The next room appeared overnight. Natalie woke before dawn, heart hammering from a dream she couldn't remember. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you hear your own blood moving. She stumbled downstairs in her pajamas, barefoot on the cold wood, and saw it immediately, a door at the end of the main hallway where there had been only a blank wall the day before. This door was different again, taller than the others, painted a soft, sickly yellow. A small child's handprint smudged the center. For a long moment, Natalie just stood there, staring, mouth dry. She didn't want to open it, but she did. Inside, the room was smaller than it should have been, a wedge-shaped space squeezed impossibly between walls. In the corner sat a single item, a wooden rocking horse, chipped and splintered. Its once bright paint faded to bruised purples and greens. Natalie's stomach turned. She knew this rocking horse too. It had been hers once, back in the house her mother had left when Natalie was 7. She remembered how it smelled of old varnish, how it used to creak even when no one touched it. The horse moved now, barely, but enough to make the room ripple, as if the walls were breathing. Natalie backed out, slammed the door, and pressed her forehead against the cool plaster. She was imagining things. She had to be. This was just stress. Memory tricks. Echoes of her therapy sessions warning her not to project her internal chaos onto external spaces. But when she opened her eyes, the hallway seemed longer than before, stretching away into a dim, impossible vanishing point. And along the walls, paintings she hadn't hung, paintings she recognized, watched her with hollow, blank faces. Natalie decided to burn the sketchbooks. She found them stuffed in a battered trunk in the attic, a trunk she didn't remember bringing. The sketchbooks were exactly as she remembered. Angry lines, twisted hallways, broken rooms, shadows with teeth. Pages she had drawn in secret, during the worst years, when her mind was amazed she couldn't escape. Tearing them apart was supposed to end it. She fed the pages into the fireplace one by one, hands trembling, smoke curling up like fingers. But as each page blackened and flaked away, the house around her began to shift. Walls folded inward. Ceilings stretched, creaking. The light bulbs in their sockets flickered to life, though she had never turned on the power. Natalie stumbled back, coughing on thick, oily smoke. In the living room, where the fire roared higher than it should, new doors appeared, dozens of them, all along the walls, each painted with something from her dreams. A crow, a cracked mirror, a stairway leading nowhere. The house wasn't falling apart, it was being completed. She fell to her knees, gripping her head. It was her fault, all of it. Every fear she had buried, every guilt she had swallowed, it was here, alive, craving more. A low humming filled the air. The doors shivered on their hinges, as if waiting. Natalie understood, suddenly and horribly, that if she opened even one, she would be trapped inside forever. And yet, deep in her chest, something wanted to go. It whispered, "You built this. You belong here." Tears blurred her vision. Smoke filled her lungs. The doors pulsed, closer, closer. She reached out a trembling hand. Natalie never remembered making the choice. Later, if there was a later, she would wonder if her hand had moved on its own, whether she had been pulled forward, or if she had simply given in. Her fingertips brushed the handle of a door painted black, its surface glossy and trembling like liquid. The moment she touched it, the house sighed, a sound like old wood settling, or something deeper, older, exhaling relief. The door swung inward. Darkness spilled out, thick and warm, wrapping around her wrists, her throat. Not hurting. Holding. The world behind her, the gravel driveway, the wind in the trees, the morning sun, peeled away like wallpaper. And still she stepped forward. Inside, there were more rooms. Endless rooms. Some tiny as closets, some vast as cathedrals. All of them humming, alive, waiting to be filled. In the distance, she saw an easel, blank and tall, and beside it a jar of cracked old brushes she remembered from her childhood. The house was empty, eager, offering itself to her. She had all the time in the world now, and somewhere, buried so deep she almost couldn't hear it, the voice whispered again, "Create." Natalie lifted the brush with a shaking hand. The first stroke bled into the wall like a wound. Outside, from the boarded windows, the mansion's exterior shifted slightly, growing, unfolding, making space for another room, another memory, another door. The end. The ocean chewed at the shore like something half-starved, and Lucas Grayson walked straight into the throat of Marrow's Bay, camera dangling from his wrist, shoes leaving shallow scars in the damp sand. The place smelled too clean, too new. From the cliffs, 100 windows glittered like watching eyes. Somewhere behind him, a bell rang once, sharp and hollow. He started with the lighthouse. The Marrow's Eye was what the town called it, a squat, salt-eaten structure older than anyone alive. Built in 1873, the volunteer guide said, voice honey sweet, by men who understood the sea's moods. She smiled too long. Her hand brushed Lucas's jacket a beat too long. Her pupils were tiny black pinpricks, watching him as if he might do something wrong at any moment. Lucas posted a short clip online later. Seaside town, friendly folks. Zero crime rate, he captioned it, with a wink emoji. At night, alone in his rented cottage, he went through his interviews. The footage blurred together. The same lines about the quaint diner, the same soft laugh about outsiders never understanding the tides, the same rehearsed wave goodbye. Lucas frowned, replayed a clip. The baker said the same phrase the tour guide had used, word for word. He chalked it up to small-town habits, tried to sleep. But sometime around midnight, a text blinked across his phone. Leave before the tide turns. He stared at it. No number, no thread history, just that single, chilling line. Lucas told himself it was a prank, locals messing with the tourist. Still, when he filmed the next day, he noticed the cracks more easily. People freezing mid-conversation, twitching at the wrong times. A man outside the bait shop smiled at him until his lips peeled too wide, showing too much gum. At the diner, his coffee was lukewarm. The waitress didn't blink once during their 5-minute conversation. When he drove to the town's only gas station, he found his car tires slashed neatly, almost surgically. A deputy patrolling nearby gave a lazy shrug. Must have caught a nail. Happens. Lucas caught it in the officer's eyes. He wasn't supposed to leave. Not yet. He posted again that night. Screw it, might as well document the weirdness too. Marrow's Bay might be too perfect. Smells staged, locals acting wrong. He hit send. The first knock came at 2 a.m. 3 slow raps against the cottage door, then silence. Lucas didn't answer. He stood still in the dark, heart hammering so hard he thought it might leave bruises. His camera battery was drained, even though he remembered charging it. Morning came brittle and gray. Lucas knew he needed proof, something undeniable. So he broke into the town's visitor center, a rusty padlock, a crowbar he'd found abandoned behind the library. Inside, the dust was too thick for a place supposedly hosting tourists every week. He found a ledger, handwritten, arrivals on one side, departures on the other. Some pages stretched back decades. Tourists checked in, never out. Wallets, phones, cameras, each tagged and bagged. Lucas recognized one phone, a missing hiker he'd seen on Reddit months ago. Cold breath tickled the back of his neck. He turned. A woman he vaguely recognized, a shop owner, stood in the doorway, face smooth and dead-eyed. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said softly. Lucas bolted, sprinting into the street, mind buzzing. Marrow's Bay wasn't a town. It was a machine, a polished trap that fed itself with travelers. Tourists lost at sea, hikers fallen from cliffs, campers who simply disappeared. Every tragic accident fed the perfect illusion, zero crime rate, eternal charm. Locals? Locals weren't born here, they were made. Lucas's frantic steps took him toward the woods behind the town, hoping to lose himself in the tangle of pines and gullies. But the trails twisted, looping back on themselves like a maze designed for rats. Signs pointed nowhere. Footsteps flanked him, always just out of sight. Shadows peeled away from trees. The woods were full of breathing things, people, and they moved with patient precision. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. By nightfall, Lucas collapsed near the cliffs. In the darkness, shapes closed in. Someone pressed a cloth over his mouth, and the world dimmed to a pinpoint. As he drifted out, he heard a voice croon, "It's better this way. You'll love it here, forever." Lucas's sister received a call the next evening. His voice, calm and cheerful, said he had fallen in love with the town and decided to stay permanently. No, he didn't want visitors just yet. He needed time to settle in. She hung up, unsettled by the strange mechanical tone to her brother's words. Weeks later, a new Marrow's Bay brochure went out to travel bloggers. In one smiling group shot, holding a fishing rod dressed in a crisp blue windbreaker, Lucas stood among the locals. His grin matched theirs, wide, glassy, and completely empty. The final frame, a new car pulling into town, a new pair of hopeful eyes, a new smile waiting to be hollowed out. The end. Rachel Kim first sees her father on a rain-slicked corner, the bookstore's neon blinking off his soaked jacket. He stands with his hands in his pockets, the way he used to after long shifts at the plant. Head bowed, face in shadow, so still it feels wrong even before she knows why. Rachel steps into the street without thinking, into the traffic she barely hears, her heart beating louder than the horns. "Dad," she calls. He doesn't answer. He just turns and walks. She follows. Down familiar streets at first, Elm, Turner, Maine. But the further she walks, the thinner the city becomes. Streetlights buzz and flicker. Storefronts she's never seen before gape open, hollow and abandoned. Somewhere behind her, the bookstore's neon blinks once, twice, and vanishes. Rachel clutches her coat tighter. Her father, no, not her father, she knows that now, keeps moving, head still bowed. She almost stops, almost. But grief has a gravity heavier than fear. They slip into an alley she's sure wasn't there yesterday. The concrete here is warped and wrong, the walls too narrow, the sky above reduced to a dark, dripping line. Her father's gait changes, limping slightly, favoring his right leg. He never limped, not even when the cancer took his breath, his weight, his voice. Rachel knows she should turn back, but she doesn't. The alley twists once, twice. The walls breathe or seem to. The air grows colder, and the world behind her crumples into something small and mean. Her phone buzzes once, a low, hungry vibration, but when she checks, the screen is black. The figure ahead shifts again, taller, shoulders broader. The jacket's wrong too, slick and clean where her father's was threadbare. Rachel stumbles, but the figure doesn't wait. It ducks through a door that wasn't there a second ago. She has no choice but to follow. Inside, a long hallway that shouldn't fit between two buildings. Fluorescent lights hum and twitch overhead. Water drips from unseen cracks. The floor is a patchwork of cracked linoleum and bare concrete. Rachel runs now. Runs because the figure is wrong and because the walls are getting closer and because the air smells like rot and ozone and sorrow. She rounds a corner too fast and almost collides with a mirror, cracked, dirty, sprawling across the wall. Her reflection looks back at her. and smiles. She backs away, breath fogging the air. When she turns, the corridor behind her has changed. No door, no alley, just endless hallways stitched together from pieces of the city that don't belong. And ahead, him, or something that still wears him. It beckons. Rachel staggers forward, every nerve screaming. Tears blur her vision. She says again, but the word is hollow even to her own ears. It leads her through a door into a subway station she knows isn't real. The signs are wrong, languages she can't read, letters that curl and shift when she tries to focus. The platform is cracked open, exposing black, endless water below. The figure stops at the edge and waits. Rachel halts a few feet away, chest heaving. It finally turns, and she sees that it isn't a man at all. It's something wrapped in her memory of her father's kindness, stretched too thin over a body that doesn't know how to be human. The mouth is wrong, too wide, the eyes gleam too brightly. It speaks without sound, and the words fall directly into her mind. Come closer. You're almost home. She shakes her head. Home is gone. Buried 2 years deep in the cold New England ground. The thing shifts again, flickering through faces. Her father's younger self, her grandmother's face. A childhood pet, eyes too human, smiling a human smile. Rachel staggers backward. The platform trembles beneath her feet. She tries to retrace her steps, but the hallway she came through is gone. Replaced by another, identical but wrong. She chooses left, then right, then left again. Each turn stretches the world thinner, like taffy pulled until it almost snaps. When she finds herself again, it's too late. Standing in the mirror is herself, but wrong. Taller, paler, a beat too slow, a breath too quiet. The mirror self lifts its hand, and Rachel, gasping, realizes she has no reflection anymore. She's already fading. Her last conscious thought is a glimpse of herself, her perfect copy, walking up the subway steps into the neon-lit city, free. While she remains trapped, running corridors that fold and stretch into forever, chased by echoes of footsteps that sound just like her own. The man she followed wasn't him, and the girl leaving the alleyway isn't her. The end. Caleb Monroe signed the clipboard with a hand that trembled just enough to make his signature look unfamiliar. The woman behind the desk smiled a practiced smile, her teeth too white, her eyes too dull. "Welcome to the somnogenesis study," she said, sliding the consent form into a tray without glancing at it. "You're going to sleep like a baby." Caleb offered a grim smile. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in years, ever since the divorce, ever since nights began to stretch and twist like pulled taffy. The facility itself was warm, pleasant even, a warren of softly lit hallways, soothing colors, the faint smell of lavender, no locks on the doors, no restraints, just a bed, a monitor, and a discreet ceiling camera with a blinking green light. Easy money, they'd said. Sleep, get paid. The first night, Caleb drifted off into a darkness so deep it felt like falling into a well. Dreamless, painless. When he woke, the monitor beside his bed displayed a still image, him curled peacefully under the covers. Reassuring. The second night, another photo awaited him, but this time he wasn't sleeping. He was sitting upright, eyes wide, mouth slack, staring straight into the camera. Caleb blinked at the screen. Had he gotten up? Was it sleepwalking? He didn't remember moving. His bones ached with the heaviness of deep, unnatural sleep. The third night, there were 2 images. In the first, Caleb was standing over another patient's bed, hand raised as if about to touch them. In the second, he was crouched in the hallway, drawing something jagged and looping across the floor in what looked like black ink. He rubbed his palms absently, feeling a faint, sticky residue he couldn't explain. The staff remained infuriatingly upbeat. When he tried to show them the monitor, the images were gone, replaced by the company logo, a blue wave curling over a smiling moon. Stressed Dreameric, her voice a dry rustle, very common in early trials. Caleb tried to leave that night. He packed his things, found the corridor, but no matter how many turns he took, how many emergency exits he pushed through, every door led back to his room. His bed, his monitor, panic bubbled in his chest. He tried to stay awake, but the moment he closed his eyes, even to blink, sleep slammed down on him like a lid. The images grew worse. Now the snapshots showed Caleb smiling, his face wrong somehow. teeth bared too wide, eyes glinting. Writing symbols on the walls, long scratches looping endlessly. In one photo, he saw himself unscrewing the camera from the ceiling, only to replace it with another, larger one. In the waking world, the room changed subtly. The walls seemed to breathe. The bed shifted an inch closer to the door every time he turned away. He stopped eating, stopped trusting the water. On the sixth night, Caleb found a message scratched into the underside of his bed. Don't let the camera see you sleep. He stared at it for a long time, heart pounding, then turned to the monitor. It showed him lying perfectly still, eyes open. Except he wasn't in bed. He was standing right there, watching the monitor. He turned around slowly. Nothing behind him. Just the humming white noise of the air vent and the soft blinking of the green light overhead. The next time he slept, he woke to find new symbols carved into his skin, looping, alien shapes trailing up his arms and across his chest. His fingers ached like he'd been gripping something too tightly. They were changing him. No, they were copying him. Caleb smashed the monitor with the heel of his hand, but when he looked back, it was whole again, screen flickering, showing a live feed, not of the room, but of himself in the hallway, walking toward a door marked exit. He rushed to follow. The hallway stretched on forever, looping impossibly like a snake eating its own tail. The exit was always just around the next bend, always one door further. He finally found it, a rusted red door with no handle. A surveillance camera hovered above it, eye blank and waiting. The monitor on the wall beside it flared to life. It showed Caleb stepping through the door, smiling, raising a hand in farewell. Caleb didn't move. His feet refused. The screen, Caleb winked and blew him a kiss. The hallway, Caleb screamed soundlessly. The real Caleb staggered back toward his room. By the final night, Caleb could no longer tell if he was awake. The symbols crawled over the walls like ivy. The cameras whispered when he passed beneath them. He lay down, too tired to fight. He watched the monitor through half-closed eyes. The screen showed a new figure standing by the bed, him, but not him. The stranger leaned closer to the camera, its smile stretching grotesquely, lips splitting at the corners. It whispered something Caleb couldn't hear. The monitor flickered once, twice. Then Caleb was gone from the bed. Only the smiling stranger remained. Weeks later, a new recruit arrived. The facility looked the same, warm, clean, inviting. No locks on the doors, no restraints. The recruit was shown to Caleb's old room. There was a new monitor now, larger, brighter, and above it, just beneath the camera, a small, neat plaque had been installed. It read, "Smile for the camera." The end. Donna Reyes knew every sidewalk crack and telephone pole of Breakwater Bay. The town stretched like a sleepy dog along the coast, too small to matter to the outside world, too stubborn to change. She spent 20 years stitching its veins, roads, tunnels, evacuation routes, believing she was making it safer, stronger, prepared. Morning light bled through the fog. Donna parked in her usual spot outside the municipal building, coffee in hand, clipboard tucked under her arm. Above her, the emergency siren tower, tall, gray, always silent, loomed like a forgotten watchman. Today was supposed to be simple: check the coastal levy reports, attend the budget meeting, sign off on an evacuation drill scheduled for next month. But a small notice had appeared in the emergency logs last night. An automatic alert flagged siren system anomaly at 2:13 a.m. When she called the technician, he shrugged it off. No storms were forecasted. No drills were planned. Just a glitch. Donna frowned. The siren system hadn't gone off once since the test 2 years ago. Breakwater Bay was too safe, too quiet, but something itched at her, under her skin. A faint unease, like seeing a house light on where no one should be home. By noon, the fog hadn't lifted, and Donna hadn't yet realized that the town's silence wasn't peace. It was permission. By early afternoon, rain gnawed at the rooftops like hungry teeth. Donna stared out her office window, phone pressed to her ear. "No flood warnings?" she asked, tapping her pen nervously. "None," said the Weather Bureau agent, voice crackling through static. "Forecast says light showers. No alert needed." Donna hung up, uneasy. The rain was not light. Streams formed in the gutters, rushing thick and brown. On Main Street, sandbags appeared outside shop doors, not from any order, but instinct. At 2:42 p.m., the emergency broadcast system blared from radios and TVs. "This is a test of the coastal emergency alert system." Donna jumped at the noise. A test? She hadn't scheduled any. No one had. She checked the logs again. New entries appeared. Timestamps from the evacuation order initiated 3:10 p.m. Landslide risk elevated 3:45 p.m. She blinked, heart hammering. It was only 2:50 p.m. The siren tower remained dead silent. Something pounded at her chest. She grabbed her jacket, bolted out into the streets, wine slapping against her. People looked around, puzzled. No alarms, no police guidance, only the raw, rising noise of water in the storm drains. Near the shoreline, Donna saw something that twisted her stomach. The newly built evacuation bridge, a project she once proudly approved, already submerged, and no one had been warned. Above her, the sky sagged lower, as if ready to fall. By 3:30 p.m., Breakwater Bay was drowning. Donna waded through knee-high water, gripping the cold railings of storefronts for balance. Her phone vibrated uselessly. Duplicate messages repeating the same words proceed to designated evacuation routes. She staggered to the mouth of Harbor Tunnel, the main escape artery she had championed. But the tunnel mouth gaped open like a wound, black and half-collapsed. An iron gate twisted shut. Beyond it, lights flickered, vehicles still, trapped like insects in amber. Above the ruined entrance, a new sign blinked mechanically. Route active. Donna staggered back. The town's systems weren't warning them. They were mocking them. A child's voice floated on the wind, thin and wrong. "Follow the arrows, miss. Follow the arrows." She spun around, no one there, only soaked mannequins drifting from a broken clothing store, arms bobbing as if pointing the way. Her head pounded. This was her infrastructure, her designs. She had approved the budget cuts, the cheap reinforcements, the blind belief in stability. The siren tower finally screamed, but it was not a warning. It was a eulogy. The sound rattled through her ribs, mourning a town already claimed by the sea. Donna fell to her knees in the cold, rising water, choking on the taste of iron and regret. Donna stumbled up the hillside, past broken fences and collapsed porches. The town spread out below her like a drowning memory. Sirens wailed uselessly over crushed cars, flooded homes, bodies like driftwood. At the top, the Emergency Operations Center, a squat cement building she once called her proudest project, stood untouched. She burst through the doors. Inside, banks of monitors blinked calmly, tracking every street, every sinking home. A screen flashed messages: subject behavior, phase progression, acceptable loss. Donna froze. The center wasn't controlling the disaster, it was watching it. On a final screen, a map pulsed, her town ringed in red, a tiny blinking beacon, and beneath it, prepare next test site, arrival imminent. A sickening clarity hit her. They were never meant to survive. The infrastructure, the sirens, the drills, it was all theater. Breakwater Bay was a study in hopelessness. She saw herself on the monitors, a woman, soaked and broken, clinging to systems she had once worshipped, a ghost in the machine she helped build. Outside, another bus rolled into town, fresh faces peering through fogged windows, unaware. The sirens screamed again, not a warning, but a welcome. Donna slumped against the console, silent. There would be no rescue, not for her. Not for them. The rain softened to a mist. Donna staggered outside, boots sinking into mud and broken glass. On the last patch of dry ground, she stood alone. Far out at sea, a second siren bloomed through the grayness, a deeper, more mournful tone. She turned, blinking into the mist. Across the battered hills, new lights flickered. Another town, another test group. Donna dropped her clipboard into the rising water, watching it drift away like a piece of her soul. In the end, she didn't run. There was nowhere left to go. The sirens were never meant for her. They were always for the next ones. And somewhere beyond the fog, the gears of the experiment turned once more. The end. The first thing Nathan Ellis noticed was a stutter in the glass. A tiny delay, half a heartbeat behind his raised hand. Enough to make him squint and step closer, peering at his reflection under the tired lights of the museum's west wing. Maybe it was the antique glass, he thought. Old surfaces sometimes warped. Yet when he turned away, he caught, just for a moment, his reflection not turning with him. He rubbed his eyes and laughed under his breath. Long hours, bad coffee, nerves. The new exhibit, a towering, dust-smudged mirror salvaged from the ruins of Greystone Asylum, needed 1,000 adjustments, and none of them had gone easily. Still, Nathan felt the cold tremble of something wrong. Visitors began to notice. Hushed conversations near the mirror's roped perimeter. There's two of him. One looks older, don't you think? Children tugged on parents' coats, pointing with wide, uncertain eyes. Nathan reviewed the security footage one sleepless night. He watched himself clean the mirror's heavy frame, ragging away fingerprints, until 3 minutes in, his reflection smiled at him. A full, slow smile Nathan knew he hadn't made. The real Nathan, on tape, simply stood frozen, rag limp in his hand. The coffee grew cold beside him. The museum's empty halls groaned in the night wind. At first, he told himself he was seeing things. Stress, imagination. But every day it worsened. One morning, as he adjusted a display across the hall, he glimpsed his reflection tapping confidently on the mirror's frame, like testing the strength of a door. Nathan's hands stayed clenched at his sides. The reflection grinned and winked. He stopped sleeping. He stopped calling his sister. His face grew pale, his voice thinner. Visitors commented less and less to him. Instead, they spoke to the man in the mirror. Then there were the dreams, more vivid than anything he'd ever felt awake. Dreams of stepping into the mirror, of touching the cold glass and slipping through like water, of finding himself trapped inside, screaming without sound, while the other walked away smiling. During a drunken call to Dr. Ramirez, an archivist friend from Greystone's old records, Nathan heard a word he didn't understand: receptive artifacts. Some relics weren't just furniture, Ramirez said. They were built to record, maybe even replace. Patients, visitors, it didn't matter. Prototypes, early surveillance tech, experimental, dangerous. Nathan laughed too hard, the kind of laughter that hurt his throat and echoed too much around his tiny kitchen. The next day, the mirror's surface pulsed like a heartbeat when he approached. His reflection didn't bother mimicking anymore. It stood taller, straighter, dressed sharper, suit ironed, tie knotted crisply. Confidence Nathan could barely remember ever having. When he blinked, the figure blinked a beat slower. When he spoke aloud, the voice that answered wasn't quite his own. Late one evening, after the museum closed, Nathan made a decision that felt more like surrender. He pulled the heavy canvas tarp over the mirror and staggered back, hands trembling. He thought he was safe. Until he checked the security feed. The footage showed Nathan standing before the covered mirror, but inside the screen, under the tarp's thin shroud, he could still see himself, grinning hungrily, eyes black pools swallowing the light. He smashed the screen. He smashed 3 more on his way out the door. It didn't help. Reality outside the museum began bending around him. People, friends, co-workers began treating him differently, forgetting his name, flinching when he spoke, calling him by the wrong title. The final proof came in a bureaucratic email. Notice, change of personnel. Nathan L. attached was a photo, his photo, but the man in it stood taller, smiled wider. A version of himself Nathan no longer recognized. One cold night, driven by a fury so sharp it made his teeth ache, Nathan stormed the museum. The halls felt different now, warmer somehow, more alive. The mirror stood uncovered, and it was waiting. Nathan grabbed a crowbar from the emergency kit. Without hesitation, he swung with every ounce of rage and terror, shattering the glass in a screech of splintered reflections. The pieces fell, glinting like dying stars across the marble floor. But when he looked around, he realized nothing had changed. On every polished surface, every display case, every window, he caught glimpses of himself, wrong and smiling, walking free while he stood rooted, breathless, unseen. Panic clawed its way up his spine. Nathan staggered toward the museum's exit. The automatic doors opened soundlessly before him, but the reflection didn't follow. He pressed a hand against the glass. It passed through nothing. The other, standing beyond, adjusted his jacket and walked into the night, blending effortlessly into the city's flow. Nathan pounded helplessly against the inside of the museum's security screens, against the chrome elevator doors, against the surface of his own eyes reflected back at him. No one looked twice. Later, in the security office, the night guard filed a routine report. Subject exited premises without incident. Attached was a clip showing Nathan, smiling, alive, normal. waving cheerfully at the cameras before disappearing into the dark. Behind him, deep within the fractured ruins of the mirror exhibit, another figure moved, thin, shuddering, trapped behind the spiderweb cracks, smiling faintly, waiting for someone to notice, someone to come closer, someone to stand before the glass. The end. The first voicemail was short. "Congratulations on your new position, Elise. You've worked so hard for this." Elise Vernon, 32, communications specialist, sitting in her same cubicle under the same flickering light, blinked at her phone. She hadn't changed jobs. She hadn't even updated her resume in 2 years. When she asked her boss about it, he smiled like a kindergarten teacher correcting a wayward child. "You're moving to the downtown branch, remember? You start next week." Elise stammered. No, she didn't, but every word seemed to slide off his concern-polished smile. "You've been under a lot of stress," he said kindly, "but we're here for you." The second voicemail congratulated her on her engagement. The ring wasn't on her finger that morning, but by lunch it was. A modest diamond, glinting on a hand she almost didn't recognize. Her friends threw her a surprise party at a restaurant she'd never heard of. "You always said it would be low-key," her supposed fiancé whispered in her ear. She didn't know him. His touch was warm and familiar. It made her stomach turn. When she tried to object, her sister pulled her aside. "Elise, you've been confused lately. It's okay. Just breathe." The third voicemail. "Congrats on your new home." Boxes filled a living room she had no memory of entering. Framed photos showed her smiling with people she didn't know, in places she'd never been. She tried to call the police. Her call dropped before connecting. She visited the old apartment she'd called home for 5 years. A young couple answered the door. "We've been living here for months," they said. No record of her lease existed anymore. No record of Elise Vernon living there at all. Each new voicemail erased a little more of her world. Her memories became suspicious artifacts, heavy and alien. When she screamed at her sister, begged her to remember the truth, her sister only patted her hand, tears glistening. "You'll be okay soon. They'll call you if you forget." The support group met in the basement of a half-boarded-up laundromat. 12 folding chairs, half of them empty. Furtive faces, hollow eyes, whispered warnings. "They rewrite you," a woman muttered, not meeting Elise's eyes. "Through the calls, through everyone else. You can fight for a while, but if you don't pick up, what happens?" Elise asked. "They call louder," the woman said, "until you answer, until you believe them, until you forget who you were." One man sat rocking in the corner. His phone buzzed again and again on the floor beside him. Each vibration made him flinch. "They want you to accept," the woman said. "It's easier when you don't fight." Elise stared at her own phone. It vibrated in her pocket, incessant, a wasp trapped under glass. That night she smashed it with a hammer, pulverizing it until the screen was nothing but glittering black shards. She wept with relief. She thought she was free. The next morning she woke to the sound of applause. From her window she saw a new billboard stretching across the sky. Her own smiling face. The words beneath it, she finally accepted who she was always meant to be. Cars honked in celebration. Strangers waved. A nearby cafe sold Elise specials, lattes with extra foam hearts. In the mirror, her reflection grinned back with a strange kind of peace, as if she had always lived here, always loved him, always wanted this. Inside, Elise screamed. No sound left her lips. In the distance, a new phone rang. She didn't need to pick it up to know what it would say. "Congratulations." The end. Adam Wells clocked in at noon and tried not to think about the second shift waiting for him. Jen had called in sick again. Flu or flu, it didn't matter. His manager, Rick, grinned that fake, coffee-stained grin and clapped Adam on the shoulder. "You're a real team player, buddy. Just don't stay until closing, huh?" Rick laughed, but his hand lingered on Adam's shoulder a little too long. By 11 o'clock, the superstore's bones began to creak. The loudspeakers bled out tinny strains of a song Adam swore he'd already heard 6 times. Something about working 9 to 5, except now it crawled slower. the singer's voice drooping lower each time. He pushed a cart of clearance pool noodles back to seasonal when he noticed aisle 17 didn't lead to seasonal anymore. It curled into books, even though books was supposed to be 2 sections over. "You're just tired," Adam muttered. He hadn't eaten since the break room hot dog at 2 p.m., probably some kind of low blood sugar hallucination. He forced a laugh, but the sound of it echoed weirdly in the rafters. In the checkout lanes, the few remaining customers looped endlessly. A woman with frazzled hair scanned a frozen dinner. The register beeped. She removed it from her cart, put it back in, scanned it again. Beep. Again. Beep. Another man kept asking, "Where's the eggs?" even while standing directly under a hanging sign that read dairy in cheerful blue letters. Adam wiped his sweaty palms on his apron. The screens at checkout flickered, showing not totals but flashing messages. "Stay with us. Employee of the century. Apply now." The wall clock's hands jittered against 11:59 p.m., refusing to fall. Adam dumped the cart and hurried toward the sliding doors. They didn't budge. He slapped his palm against the glass. Nothing. When he cupped his hands and peered through, he didn't see the parking lot. He saw another store. Same cracked tile floors, same flickering fluorescence stretching forever. In the distance, he could just make out another Adam, hunched and small, pushing a cart of clearance pool noodles into a yawning void. He stumbled back, heart punching his ribs. "Hey, hello, Rick?" Adam called. His voice fell flat, swallowed by the buzzing lights. He sprinted back toward the employee exit behind electronics, only to find the hallway gone, swallowed by an endless row of televisions, each showing his own confused face. Above the televisions, a new sign blinked into existence. "Promotion awaits." Adam spun in circles, trying to find a break in the aisles. His breath hitched. No matter where he turned, the end caps blinked with bright, cheerful offers. "Join the team. One of us." The store hummed louder, as if breathing. A figure waited by the customer service desk. It wore an identical blue apron, but its face, God, the face, was wrong. Pale and sagging, eyes twin pits of ink. Yet when it smiled, Adam felt a dizzying wave of recognition. "It's me," he thought. "It's just me after a few more hours on the clock." "You've earned a promotion," Hollow Adam said. Its voice was syrup-thick, oozing into Adam's ears, clogging his thoughts. "I just want to go home." "Home," Hollow Adam giggled. "You don't even remember where that is, do you?" Adam opened his mouth, but the name of his street, the apartment number, the color of his girlfriend's eyes, tumbled into dust. He turned and ran. Aisles stretched impossibly long. Every few steps he passed a sign that offered him another title, Senior Stock Associate of Forever, Night Supervisor of Dreams. Time hiccuped, backflipped. His legs ached, his lungs burned. But he couldn't find a wall, a window, even a damn fire exit. Only endless fluorescent lit nothing. Finally, he collapsed by the clearance rack. His apron was soaked through. His hands shook as he pressed them into his eyes, trying to squeeze himself awake. A clipboard thunked down in front of him. Hollow Adam knelt, holding a cheap ballpoint pen. The contract was short, just a few lines. "Sign and stay. Help us stay open. Be recognized." "You're one of us now," Hollow Adam whispered. Adam wept. Not because he believed it, but because the thought of fighting anymore felt too heavy, too far away. His memories were moth-eaten scraps fluttering at the edges of his mind. He could still feel the vague ache of wanting something more, but couldn't name it anymore. He took the pen with trembling fingers. The ink bled a little as he scrawled his name across the bottom. It didn't even look like his handwriting. But that didn't matter. The store shuddered around him, the sound of 1,000 cash registers ringing out all at once. When Adam looked up, he saw the world anew. Bright, shining aisles gleamed under clean lights. Happy customers smiled robotically as they pushed their carts. And there he stood, behind the customer service desk, smiling back. Waiting. Welcoming. The front doors slid open. A young woman in a blue apron stepped inside, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Hey," Adam said brightly. "Welcome to the team. We're so happy to have you." The doors sealed shut behind her with a heavy final clunk. Outside, the world moved on. The store faded from maps, faded from memory. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed forever, and Adam smiled forever too. The end. Cassidy Lowe didn't look back when she closed the door for the last time. Not at the cracked tiles or the half-dug garden patch she never finished. Not at the faint stain on the stairwell where she'd once slipped with a basket of laundry. She left the old house standing there, empty, in the cold blue evening air. And with it, she hoped, all the heavy, invisible things it had soaked up from her. The arguments, the silence, the slow forgetting of who she used to be. Her new apartment buzzed with a cleaner sort of emptiness. It smelled of new paint, sterile and flat. The walls were so white they felt brittle, like they might snap if she leaned on them too hard. Cassidy unpacked quietly for 3 days straight, arranging her books, her tiny plants, her sharp-edged life. Everything here was hers, untouched, unsullied. When she finally sat down with a glass of wine and let her muscles sink into the brand-new sofa, a little thrill of freedom flared in her chest. It didn't matter that the space felt too bright at night, or that the heating ticked and groaned like an old man. She was free. She was sure of it. The first package arrived 2 mornings later. Cassidy found it sitting neatly on her doormat, no postage, no return address. It was wrapped in brown paper, tied with a thin red string that looked sticky to the touch. Inside, she found her old coffee mug, the chipped one with a faded bluebird painted on the side. The crack along the rim was the same. The dark stain inside, from too many hurried mornings and forgotten rinses, was the same. Only the smell was different. It reeked, faintly but sharply, of damp soil and rotting wood. Cassidy set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it. Maybe her ex had dropped it off, a final petty gesture. Or maybe she'd forgotten it somehow, and it had followed her like a stray cat. She tossed the mug in the trash. The next morning, there was another package, smaller this time. Inside, a folded gray sweater she hadn't worn in years, the sleeves pilled from nervous fidgeting. It was colder to the touch than it should have been, as if it had been sitting out under the stars. When she pressed it to her chest, an image flashed. A wooden staircase she didn't recognize, yawning downward into a black, breathless basement. Cassidy dropped the sweater as if it had burned her. Cassidy tried to ignore it. She threw the sweater down the trash chute, wiped her hands clean, and refused to flinch when the heater popped at midnight. But every morning, a new package waited. One held a Polaroid picture of her as a child, except she wasn't sure it was her. The girl in the photo had Cassidy's mouth, her stubborn cowlick, but the house behind her was wrong. Tall and thin, leaning sideways like it might tip into the swampy yard. Another package contained a bent house key. It weighed heavily in her palm, greasy and warm, like something that had been carried in a mouth for a long time. When she pressed it against her new apartment's front door, she heard a click. For one awful second, Cassidy smelled the old house, the wet carpet by the back door, the acrid breath of the fireplace that never quite lit right. And something else, something bigger, moving slow and patient, just out of sight, like a hand closing around her. She dropped the key. When she turned around, the apartment was too quiet. Every surface gleamed too hard. Every shadow stretched a little too long, as if trying to reach her. Cassidy stopped sleeping. The ticking walls, the shifting light, the steady arrival of forgotten things wore her thin. One night, she woke to find the packages already inside her apartment, stacked neatly at the foot of her bed. No locks had been broken, no windows cracked open. It was as if the space itself had swallowed them and birthed them back, like breath through unseen lungs. With shaking hands, she opened the top box. Inside was a tiny, familiar thing, a charm bracelet she had lost at 8 years old. The silver charms jingled softly, but when Cassidy touched them, she didn't see her childhood bedroom. She saw a different room, with walls that pulsed like living skin, and furniture sagging under invisible weight. "You left too much behind," a voice whispered from nowhere, from everywhere. Soft, coaxing. Older than her, but somehow still hers. The house had not been empty. It had been waiting. It had held on to every scraped knee, every whispered wish, every lonely evening she'd tucked into the floorboards. Cassidy staggered backward, clutching the bracelet, feeling something tug inside her chest, like a root snapping free of dry soil. Come home. Cassidy didn't remember walking to the door. Her feet moved on their own, guided by something soft and invisible threading through her bones. The hallway outside wasn't her bright, sterile corridor anymore. It was dim and narrow, sagging inward. The carpet was the mustard yellow from her childhood, the air thick with the sharp metallic scent of thunderstorms. Somewhere ahead, she saw a front door she knew too well. The peeling green paint, the brass knob polished smooth by years of anxious fingers. Her old house, waiting, breathing, hungry. Cassidy clutched the bracelet tighter, but the charms melted into her palm, sinking into her skin like rain into thirsty earth. "You are not finished without us." The house whispered with every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the settling walls. And as Cassidy stepped across the threshold, something in her mind cracked open. She forgot the white apartment, forgot the new life, the escape, the hope. All that was left were the soft, golden memories the house had prepared for her, shining, false, and sweet. Inside, the door swung shut with a sound like a heartbeat. The end. Calvin Shaw first noticed it in the reflection. The building hummed at night, the lights overhead buzzing with a static whine. Somewhere beyond the rows of empty desks, a second Calvin smiled into a conversation Calvin hadn't had. His own reflection moved with a casual ease he couldn't mimic, as if belonging there, folding into the sterile sprawl of Integrico Tower like it had always been part of it. He blinked. The other Calvin kept talking. Calvin didn't mention it. He slipped into his cubicle the next morning and answered emails, grateful for the anonymity. That's how he stayed safe. That's how he survived 20 years of budget cuts, quarterly audits, mandatory engagement workshops. Stay small, stay invisible, but now people nodded at him, smiled, slapped his back. "Congrats, man," said Vince from accounting. "For what?" Calvin asked. Vince laughed. "Don't be modest. You deserve it." On the company intranet, a banner congratulated Calvin Shaw, team lead, infrastructure support. Promotion date, 3 weeks ago. Security footage flickered behind the help desk. Calvin watched both versions of himself logging tickets, resetting routers, same uniform, same motions. But the other Calvin leaned into conversations, laughed, joked, even clapped someone's shoulder. The real Calvin leaned closer to the screen. No one else seemed to notice. Management was less helpful. "Everything looks normal," said HR. "Maybe get some rest?" He started staying late again, wandering the empty floors, tracing the humming walls with the back of his hand. Sometimes the ceiling panels breathed, just slightly. Sometimes the printer in marketing spat out sheets of meaningless numbers, curling and yellowing under the flickering lights. Maintenance staff muttered when he passed. "Another one," said a voice behind a door Calvin wasn't supposed to hear. Always the quiet ones. The files weren't even hidden. Integrico's internal handbook, buried under layers of dead links, described a performance continuity program in clinical, bloodless language. Engagement thresholds, emotional viability scores, replacement protocols. Employees flagged as non-viable weren't terminated. They were optimized, replicated. The original versions were phased out. Calvin sat frozen in the deserted break room, the screen's glow casting his own reflection back at him, paler, thinner, dissolving. His hands trembled over the mouse. As he clicked through pages, whole folders blinked out. "Access denied. Access denied. Access denied." The other Calvin wore his face better. The other Calvin sat at his desk, laughing at things Calvin didn't find funny. His coworkers orbited him now. The bosses smiled as they passed. Calvin tried to speak, but his voice caught. His tongue felt wrong, heavy. Every time he raised concerns, his badge malfunctioned. His emails bounced back undelivered. His ID photo blurred a little more each day. On Thursday, his nameplate disappeared from his cubicle. No one mentioned it. Cornered in the server room, he found the other Calvin waiting. The fluorescent lights buzzed low and mean. The doppelganger smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just efficiently, like a function had been completed. "You're not being punished," it said in Calvin's voice. "You were deferred." Calvin pressed his back against the cold rack of servers. "You're not me," he croaked. The other Calvin tilted his head, confused, almost pitying. "I was never the problem," it said. "You were." Somewhere in the humming walls, something heavy began to grind. Doors locking, records updating. "You should be proud," it said, stepping closer. "You made this easy." Screens throughout the building blinked awake, showing footage on every monitor. Calvin slouched at his desk, then slowly losing coherence, pixel by pixel. First a hand went fuzzy, then the face, then the whole figure, dissolving into a smear against the bland office backdrop. Calvin clawed at the server cabinet. His fingers left no marks. By Friday, his desk sat empty. HR confirmed there was only one Calvin Shaw on file. Must be a clerical error, they said, smiling too much, eyes too flat. Some nights, late after the last elevator chimed, the cameras caught a faint image flickering near the 14th floor. A figure moving desk to desk, trying to log in, trying to prove it was still there. The system flagged it as background noise. No further action required. The end. Sophia Grant tugged her coat tighter as she pushed open the heavy glass doors. The municipal building loomed like a forgotten mausoleum, its stone columns blackened by decades of rain and exhaust. Inside, the air smelled of damp paper and something sourer, mildew, maybe, or rot. At the front desk, an old man sat beneath a flickering fluorescent light. His skin was as thin and crumpled as the ledger he guarded. Name, he asked, without looking up. Sophia hesitated. The ledger was massive, its pages the color of old teeth. Line after line of tight, spidery handwriting filled its open spread. Just for attendance, the man added, gently tapping the page with a cracked fingernail. Obliging. She was always obliging. Sophia signed her name. The moment her pen left the page, a strange vertigo spun her vision. She clutched the desk for balance. The man smiled faintly, eyes glassy. "You're all set." Sophia nodded and moved on, the echoes of her heels swallowed by the endless hallways. The first thing she forgot was her Uber driver's face. She had chatted with him all morning. Now the memory was smudged, an impression of teeth and laughter, but no features. She brushed it off. Stress, probably. The building was endless, corridors yawning in unnatural geometries, yellow-tinted windows looking out onto brick walls, buzzing fluorescent lights sputtering overhead. Every so often, Sophia passed open office doors. Inside, men and women shuffled paper mechanically, faces slack and unfocused. One smiled at her, a woman wearing a lanyard with no name on it, but there was no recognition in her gaze. Sophia quickened her pace. In a small conference room, she found a few others. They sat at scattered tables, sipping stale coffee, watching an unseen point just beyond her shoulder. No one spoke. A pang of dread hit her. Sophia reached for her phone to text her sister, but the contacts list was blank. She checked again. Blank. Even her own number was missing. Her breath came shallow. The room seemed to narrow around her. She shoved the phone into her pocket and fled back into the maze. A janitor, old, hunched, with rubber gloves, stepped from a side hall as she passed. His eyes flickered with something almost human. "Lost?" he rasped. "I need to leave," she said. "Something's wrong." He nodded solemnly. "You signed in, didn't you?" She stiffened. "What does that matter?" The janitor's rubber-gloved hand gestured vaguely down the corridor. "Ledger keeps you here. Eats you little by little. Gotta erase yourself. Fast." He shuffled away, blending into the gloom. Sophia ran. The halls twisted nonsensically. Signs pointed in conflicting directions. Archives, sheets. Her memories bled away with every step. Friends' names, birthdays, the address of the courthouse where she worked. Even her own handwriting seemed unfamiliar when she glimpsed her name on a discarded post-it stuck to a file cabinet. At last, down a narrow stairwell, she found it. A cavernous basement archive, colder than the rest of the building, filled with towers of paper and broken desks. There at the center, resting on a plinth under a single dead bulb, the ledger. As Sophia approached, the building groaned around her. The ledger's pages flipped by themselves, faster and faster, the wind from their motion slapping her cheeks. Names blurred together: Jonathan Bryce, Evelyn Hart, Marie Carter, Sophia Grant. Her name pulsed on the page, ink swimming as if still wet. Her hands shook. She reached out, and the ledger screamed. The fluorescent lights above exploded, showering glass down. Somewhere in the darkness she heard whispering, dozens, hundreds of voices hissing her name, urging her to sit down, to smile, to file, to comply. Just stay. Sophia ripped the page. A blast of freezing air threw her backward. For a moment she saw herself across the room, seated at a cracked reception desk, smiling blandly, hands poised over a stack of blank forms. The vision flickered and was gone. Clutching the torn sheet, she ran. The glass doors resisted her like thick syrup. but she forced herself through. Outside, the evening sun stung her eyes. People hurried along the streets. The world looked normal. But when Sophia stumbled up to a woman and begged to borrow her phone, the woman recoiled as if from a stranger. Sophia dialed her sister's number, one of the few she still remembered, but all she got was a flat, robotic tone. "This number is not in service." She made it home somehow, the apartment strangely unfamiliar. Her own name on the mailbox looked faded, barely legible. Inside, she collapsed onto the couch. Maybe she just needed sleep. Maybe everything would be better tomorrow. The mailbox clattered outside. Sophia frowned. She hadn't ordered anything. She padded to the door, opened the box. Inside was a thick envelope, yellowed and brittle. No return address. Her name was written on it, in the same spidery handwriting as the ledger. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Welcome to the Department of Records. Your casework begins Monday. Thank you for your service." Outside, in the gathering dusk, she thought she heard the municipal building creak, like something old and hungry, settling in for the night. The end. Marcus Blaine checked into Orchard Pines Rehab Center on a Monday afternoon, so hot the asphalt outside shimmered like a bad fever dream. The place looked like it had once been a sanitarium, the kind where they treated TB with cold baths and whispered prayers. Yellowed brick, heavy oak doors, and a front desk clerk who smiled like she knew something he didn't. "This is the best healing money can buy," she said, handing him a key and a laminated brochure. "You're in for something special, Mr. Blaine." Marcus had heard that before. In the end, healing always cost more than you thought and left you worse off than you started. They took him straight to the breathing room after intake. It was a long, humid hall lined with metal chairs, each chair hooked to a machine that looked like a cross between a scuba tank and an executioner's hood. A nurse with paper-dry hands strapped a clunky respirator over his mouth and nose. The plastic was cracked and yellowing, like old bones. "Just breathe," she said. "It knows what you need." The hiss of the mask filled his ears. The mist tasted metallic, like old coins. At first, there was just a buzz behind his eyes, a loosening of the world. Then the memories began. A little girl running through sunlit fields, the heavy, aching swell of childbirth, a man's coarse hand dragging a razor over a stubbled jaw. None of them were his, not one. He yanked the mask off and staggered to the bathroom. In the cracked mirror, he saw his own face. But for a moment, just for a flicker, it wasn't quite right. His left eye drooped. His mouth curled in a sneer he'd never worn. Days bled together after that. Every session left him lighter somehow, a little more hollow. His scarred wrist, broken when he fell off a swing set at 7, disappeared one morning, replaced by a jagged pink line along his thigh he couldn't remember earning. Handwriting changed too. He'd always printed in block letters, engineer neat. Now his hand curled elegant, looping cursive across his daily therapy journals. When the counselor pointed it out, Marcus laughed too hard, a jagged foreign sound in his throat. He wasn't the only one falling apart. One afternoon in the cafeteria, a man named Henry blinked at his plate of gray stew and whispered, "I'm not Henry anymore," before shoving a spoonful into his mouth and crying like a baby. Marcus stopped sleeping. The walls of Orchard Pines seemed to flex when he walked the halls at night, breathing in slow, syrupy sighs. The mist from the therapy room seeped into the vents, a constant, wet pulse against the back of his throat. In the small bathroom off the east wing, the mirror did more than flicker now. It moved. Faces slid beneath his own reflection like fish beneath ice, grinning, grimacing, pleading. He decided he needed answers, and fast. Late one night, he broke into the maintenance wing, following the thrum of the machines. Rows and rows of respirators lined the walls, each tagged with a name and 2 dates, a birth date and a death date. Some of the tags were fresh, some were old and yellowed like parchment. In the farthest row, he found a respirator marked Marcus Blaine and an open-ended second date, only a dash after his birth year. He staggered back, gasping. The respirators weren't cleaning patients, they were harvesting them, imprinting lost souls onto new bodies like ink bleeding through cheap paper. A voice crackled in the cycle. "Have you It was the dry-hand nurse, her smile wide, terrible. Marcus ran. The next morning, they forced him back into the breathing room. "Final integration session," the nurse said sweetly. "You'll feel brand new when it's done." The mask clamped over his face before he could fight. The mist roared in his lungs. Breathe. Breathe and be new. Memories flooded him, strange, terrifying floods. A woman kneeling beside a grave, keening like a wounded animal. A boy's first fistfight in a schoolyard dust storm. A stroke-withered old man screaming at shadows. Marcus clawed at the mask. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready to go. The room spun. His hands weren't his hands anymore. Longer fingers, brittle nails, scars blooming and vanishing on his skin like time-lapse flowers. "I am Marcus Blaine," he thought fiercely. "I am Marcus Blaine. I am Marcus." The world cracked open. When he woke, the respirator was gone. He lay alone in a narrow, sun-washed room that smelled faintly of bleach and rust. The mirror across from him shimmered. Marcus stood, limbs aching and alien, and stumbled toward it. The man in the mirror was smiling. The man in the mirror was not Marcus Blaine. He was someone older, someone who had loved and lost and fought and forgotten things Marcus had never known. There was a flicker of dozens of others behind the man's eyes, like moths trapped behind glass. In his chest, something unfamiliar breathed. Not Marcus's lungs, not Marcus's breath, but still he breathed. He turned away from the mirror. Outside his window, the Orchard Pines lawn stretched in sickly green waves. A new patient limped up the cracked walkway, suitcase dragging behind. The nurses waited at the door, smiling, masks in hand. And Marcus, or whoever he was now, smiled too. The end. The storm came in hard, peeling at the edges of Emily Carson's world. Wind roared against the house she'd built for perfect safety, secluded, automated, untouchable. When the power died, she moved by instinct. Candles, backup batteries, emergency procedures. Only as she sealed the windows did she notice the front door, yawning half open like a broken jaw. She froze. Her security system was down. Her fortress had gaped wide to the night. Heart hammering, she pushed the door shut. It groaned like something reluctant to be caged. For a moment, she thought she heard the storm whisper her name. By morning, the house was wrong. It wasn't the blinking smart locks or the dead silence of the speakers. It was the smell of baking bread drifting from the empty kitchen. Bread her mother used to make before the arguments tore them apart. Bread Emily hadn't tasted in 20 years. She found a stuffed rabbit on her writing chair. Bun Bun? From a childhood she'd tried to forget. She had burned him after her father left, hadn't she? Yet here he sat, threadbare and real, staring at her with blind buttons. She threw it in the trash. The wind moaned against the walls again, low and almost pleased. The house shifted around her. In the study, she heard a girl's laughter. Emily tiptoed closer, pulse skittering, and saw a younger version of herself spinning in the chair, head thrown back in joy. For one aching second, she wanted to join her. The vision blurred. In the dining room, a teenage Emily argued with a shadowy figure, flinging invisible accusations. Upstairs, a woman she almost recognized held a child's hand, her hand. A small, grinning boy tugged at her jeans. "You could have had this. You still can." The voice wasn't hers, but it filled her head, curling around her thoughts like smoke. Reality collapsed in pieces. Mirrors no longer showed her reflection. Instead, they showed other Emilys, married, mourning, victorious, broken. The walls of the house shuddered like they were breathing. New doors opened where there had been none. Familiar hallways looped into nightmares of choice and regret. A mirror above the fireplace rippled like water. Inside, an Emily in a yellow sundress smiled and beckoned. "Come home," she mouthed. Emily stumbled back. Her ankle caught on the trash bin. The stuffed rabbit stared up at her from inside it, its stitched mouth split into a smile. In the end, it wasn't violence that threatened to break her. It was kindness. Each echo, each could-have-been life offered her refuge. Love she had rejected, family she had feared to build, triumph she had deemed impossible. 1,000 paths diverged inside these walls, and they all seemed easier, sweeter, less lonely than the one she'd chosen. "Stay with us," whispered the boy she had never born. "We miss you." Whispered the mother who had died. The walls pulsed, the lights flickered. The air itself seemed to hum with longing. If she picked one, she would live it fully. Forget the aching emptiness that had built this empty kingdom. If she refused, she would shatter into pieces, another splintered echo, another ghost wandering a house of might-have-beens. Emily fled to the kitchen. She locked the heavy door, even though she knew locks didn't matter anymore. The whispers slid under the door, the light bulbs buzzed and flared. She grabbed a pen and scrawled across the last page of her notebook. I am Emily Carson. I made my choices. I will live with them. The whispers faltered. The house trembled, confused. Slowly, the lights stabilized. The house stilled. Emily slumped against the counter, tears carving paths down her cheeks. She had won. She had survived herself, or so she thought. She caught movement in the corner of her eye, the mirror over the sink. Her reflection smiled back, but its lips kept moving, whispering words Emily hadn't spoken. You left the door open too long, Emily, it said. Now you belong to all of us. And the reflection stepped closer. The end. Tom Reed first saw the email a little after midnight when the wine had softened the hard edges of the day. Subject line, don't answer the 3 knocks. The body was even dumber. When you hear 3 knocks at night, don't answer. You already did. He snorted, deleted it, and poured another glass. Urban legends were for teenagers and the chronically stupid. The first knock came that night. Soft. Tentative. 3 little taps at his door, like the polite ghost of a Jehovah's Witness. Tom barely heard it over the whir of his ceiling fan. He waited, breath caught for a second without reason, then laughed at himself and went to bed. Nothing happened. No demons, no phantom. Life went on, gray and predictable, until the second night. The knocks came again. 3 of them. Sharper this time. Measured, like a summons. He flicked on the hallway light. It sputtered once, then died with a low pop. Tom peered through the peephole. Nothing but the dim hallway with its dusty carpet and cracked exit sign. No one there. No one at all. The unease crawled in, slippery and cold. By the 4th night, the walls started peeling. Not a metaphor. Actual strips of wallpaper curling away like burned skin. Tom stared at them over his cereal bowl, numb. The knocks had come at 2 in the morning, so loud that his lamp had rattled against the wall, but he hadn't answered. He wouldn't answer. At first, he thought the maintenance man might explain it. Water damage, maybe. Except when Tom trudged down to the lobby, the front desk was unmanned. No security guard, no tenants, no hum of elevators, just silence thick enough to choke on. He reviewed the building's security tapes the next afternoon, desperate for logic. The screen flickered. Hours of footage, empty halls, dark stairwells. No one entering, no one leaving. Only Tom himself, moving through the empty, decaying shell of his life. A ghost who didn't know he was dead yet. The urban legend sites called it knock slipping, a term coined by some lunatic with a blogspot page circa 2009. The knocks are a test, the post said. Answer, and you split from reality permanently. Ignore them and watch the world rot around you until you're nothing but bones in an empty room. Tom slammed the laptop shut, laughing too loudly into the stale apartment air. Internet crazies. He didn't believe in that crap, but the peeling walls stretched wider, the air grew heavier, and the loneliness was a scream behind his ribs. 2 days later, the city outside his window was gone. Not dark, not post-apocalyptic, just absent. The skyline was a haze of gray smears, shapes half-formed like bad memories. The knock came again that night. 3. Measured, relentless. Tom pressed his forehead against the door, heart battering against his ribs. He didn't answer. He whispered, "Leave me alone." But the words died small and ridiculous in the stagnant air. He thought about Pam sometimes now, his ex-wife, with her easy smile and heavy silences. "You're not cold," she'd said once during a fight. "You're hollow, like a goddamn house nobody wants to live in." Back then, he hadn't cared. Now he pressed his palm against the photo he kept tucked in a drawer, feeling every wasted second of their marriage like a bruise. The apartment sighed around him, literally sighed, like something breathing through rotted lungs. The power died 2 nights later. The clock stopped at 2:13 a.m. His phone showed only static when he tried to call anyone. The knocks returned. 3, bone deep, demanding. He screamed into the darkness, "What do you want?" No answer. only the wallpaper curling back to expose the black bones of the building underneath. He thought about opening the door, just a crack, just enough to end it. Maybe whatever waited there would be kind. But every urban legend forum he found said the same: answer and be consumed, ignore and decay. Tom Reed, expert in dissolving human bonds, now rotted alone in the ultimate divorce, him versus reality. One evening, or what passed for evening because the sun hadn't risen in days, he found a single email waiting on his cracked laptop screen. No sender, no subject, just 6 words: you can't stop the next knock. His fingers trembled on the keyboard. He wanted to type something, anything, but the laptop sparked and went dark before he could finish the first letter. That night, the knocks were different. They weren't polite anymore. They pounded like fists of iron, each blow shivering through the skeletal frame of the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Tom crawled into the corner of his ruined living room, clutching a photo of Pam against his chest. The couch had collapsed days ago. The kitchen reeked of mold and rot. The walls bled a slow black ichor that pooled around his sneakers. The knocks shook the door on its hinges. He rocked himself, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." But even he didn't believe it anymore. The door frame splintered. A thin crack spread up the center. Beyond it, only a darkness deeper than the night, alive, pulling at the seams of his mind. Tom pressed his forehead to his knees and squeezed the picture tighter. It smelled like dust and old grief. The knocks started again, lighter now, almost playful. They wouldn't stop. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. You can't stop the next knock. Tom whispered to no one and listened to the sound of the world ending around him. The end. And that's the end. But the night is far from over. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Tell me, are you still awake? Or did the whispers follow you into your dreams? If sleep won't come just yet, there are plenty more stories waiting for you. Go on, pick another. I'll be here.